This will be the day I commit Sudoku. Good morning, everyone! I'm that dude over there, and you all really seem to like the last video of this kind. So today, I'm gonna do it again, with a much longer and personal series. It's time to say goodbye to the world of Beastars and say hello to the world of RWBY, a story by Monty Oum that follows 4 girls in their attempt to take down Satanic Mommy. RWBY is a special series to me, which is why when it falls, it hurts to hear. While I didn't watch it while it came out, I joined in right before the release of Volume 4, allowing me to witness peak right before it fell off. I plan to cover everything that occurs in the series, meaning all the other supplemental material will not be addressed, at least that I don't already know. So just to clarify, I will only cover the events of RWBY the animated series. Not Ice Queendom, not RWBY Beyond, not the manga, just RWBY. Also, I will try my best to cover this as judgment-free as I can. If things sound like they're getting judgmental, or if things seem unclear, no, it's because I made this all the way back in 2022, and Volume 8 was hype at drawing in negativity. So let's just live and dive right in. And before we can start, we need to address the trailers of the series. Not only are they canon for the events of RWBY, but they also give the flavor of the show moving forward. Also, I know that I said I wouldn't cover supplemental material, but this came out before the show, so it's more like a Beast Complex situation, showing the triumphs of the series before the actual show. Anyway, the trailers show off the main 4 going up against a threat, rising and showing off their fighting style. Ruby Rose fights off a horde of wolves after visiting her dead mom's grave during the winter season. Wai Shni shows how she got her scar from fighting a giant soldier of stone. Blake Belladonna works with a mystery man to fight robots before she cuts him off. Literally. And finally, Yang Xiaolong fights off goons in a club in search for a woman from her past. While the sound design is dated and the animation can be a bit jank, the action and choreography is on point, and to not bring up the music would actually be a crime. But if you want more info on that, I have some videos where I go over the music by volume. Get ready for Volume 4 if it's not out by the time this goes live. Just trust, love, that I'll get this out ASAP. But now let's actually dive into the main characters, and there are quite a lot. For simplicity's sake, I'll cover the main 8 characters to start, and cover the remaining ones when we get to them. God, this is gonna be a long video, I can feel it. So, Ruby Rose is the main character of RWBY, and RWBY is based off the fairy tale Little Red Riding Hood. Oh yeah, all the characters are based off stories, so get ready for that. Anyway, she is the leader of Team RWBY with her signature weapon, Crescent Rose, a ruby red scythe that becomes a sniper rifle. All weapons in RWBY are also a gun, except when they're not, and only then will we address when they're not a gun. She is the daughter to Summer Rose and Taiyang Jialong, 2 former hunters of the forces against Grimm. What are these things? I'll explain later. RWBY has silver eyes and is the youngest of her team at the wee age of 15. Her semblance is Petal Burst, a skill that allows her to move super fast. What is a semblance?
We get there when we get there!
Her main motivation is to fight for every life who cannot defend themselves. Moving on, we go to Wai Shni, the character based on Snow White. She is the heiress of the Shni Dust Company, with her trusty weapon, Mertenaster. Mertenaster is a customizable dust rapier that transforms into a revolver. She is racist. She goes by Ice Queen, and her semblance allows her to summon glyphs. She's got a lot going on inside. That's why she's the best. After Weiss is Blake Belladonna, a stoic terrorist based on the story of Beauty and the Beast. If it's not obvious, she's based off Belle. She has a lot of issues, likes to speak like Brian Griffin when she's feeling inspired, and wields the incredibly complex weapon, Gamble Shroud. Gamble Shroud is basically a sword, a grappling hook, and a semi-automatic pistol all wrapped in one. Her semblance is Shadow, a technique where she creates copies of herself to take a hit. And rounding out Team RWBY is RWBY's sister, Yang Xiaolong. Yang is based off Goldilocks, gee I wonder why, and wields Emperor Celica, special gauntlets that are also shotguns. Early on, Yang was the favorite of the group, with her party girl personality with a dangerously high temper. Her name roughly translates to Small Dragon of Sunshine, or Sunny Little Dragon. Her parents are Raven Bronwyn and Taiyang Jialong, and her semblance is Burn. basically letting her get stronger the longer the battle goes on and the more she gets hit. Our final 4 protagonists come from the best friend team, Team Juniper. Team Juniper is led by Jean Arc. His team is based off gender-bent legends. Take a wild guess who Jean is based on. The former Vomit Boy grows from goofy friend to respectable leader with his weapon Croatia Moors, a weapon that is not part gun, being a sword and shield combo. His weapon is a hand-me-down from generations before, and this guy has like 7 different sisters. While his semblance is unknown at first, we later learn that it's called Amp, allowing him to amplify his own aura or others' aura. After Jean is Nora Valkyrie, a bombshell of personality based off Thor. She has feelings for her other male teammate and is considered the fan favorite of her team. She wields Magnild, which is a warhammer that transforms into a grenade launcher. Her semblance is called High Voltage, which allows her to absorb electricity and turn it into power. Bringing the P to their team is Pyrrha Nikos, the huntress based on Achilles. She is well known throughout Remnant, appearing on special cereal boxes with her trusty weapons. No, I will not pronounce them since I know I'll butcher them, but just know that they are a spear and shield that can turn into a semi-automatic rifle. Her semblance is Polarity. This allows her to manipulate metallic objects. And finally, we introduce the last member of Team Juniper, Lai Ren, or just Ren for short. Our gender-bent Mulan is voiced by Monty Oum himself, and fights with Stormflower, a machine pistol grappling hook that can stab like a sickle. They are the quiet kid of the group, and have the semblance Tranquility, a skill that allows him to cloak his presence along with all those he touches. Now I know this sounds like a lot, but we have one last thing we need to cover before we hop into the series proper. It's everyone's least favorite thing about school, vocabulary lessons. Luckily there aren't that many words, and 4 of them just happen to be locations in the world. So starting off, we need to talk about semblance and aura. These are the hardest to define since they are incredibly vague. But from my understanding, aura and semblance are a person's soul that is manifested into power. Where they differ is how they are applied. Aura is used to shield the body from potentially fatal attacks, being compared to a force field by our resident Vomit Boy. While it's meant to be durable, it cannot hold out forever. Semblance is meant to turn a person's soul into an active skill that can assist them, whether that be in a direct way like RWBY using Petal Burst, or in a passive way like future characters Crow or Ironwood. And don't even get me started on those guys. I will get to those characters when they actually appear. And God damn it, do I hate them. The main takeaway is that these 2 concepts work together. When someone's aura breaks, they can no longer use their semblance. When someone's semblance is nullified, their aura cannot be used to protect them. At least, that's the best way I understand it, but it's more important to note that despite this power, it's not magic. Magic is its own thing, and you'll see that much later. From there, there's dust. Dust is a specialized powder made from ore that harnesses the world's natural elements. These range from your typical fire, water, and grass, to the more different in gravity, wind, and thunder. Dust can be combined with weapons to give them an elemental edge, like firing explosive shots or creating frozen pillars from a single strike. Heck, Blake can use dust with her semblance to create specific clones. But again, this is not magic. This is a natural, finite resource that comes from the world of Remnant. Speaking of the world of Remnant, the world is divided into 4 major continents: Vale, Atlas, Mistral, and Vacuo. Vale is the continent that is considered the safe haven for most people. This is because unlike the other 3 continents, Vale is the most normal, like next to Mistral. Mistral is very blessed by its wildlife, since you could experience all seasons on its continent alone. Atlas is the cold military continent that is located above the world, right above the city of Mantle, which is where all the poor people live. That's right, Atlas is classist, and as we'll learn later, slightly racist if the writers ever remember this. And then there's Vacuo. Vacuo is the desert kingdom, and that's about all you have to know from them. And finally, the last thing you have to know is the people who inhabit Remnant. Yeah, you have your typical parasites and humans, but Remnant also includes 2 other forces at play. The first are the Faunus. They are your typical anime catgirls or humans with animal traits. These range from rabbit ears to monkey tails to chameleon camouflage, but because of these traits, humanity calls them beasts, and like every other story imaginable, finds themselves better than the things that are clearly superior to them. Funnies are basically your racism is bad stand-in message, but since the racism plot is rarely ever brought up in a substantial way after volume 4 or 5, you don't need to pay attention to it. And the final force to come into play are the monsters of Grimm. Grimm are soulless beasts that inhabit the world of Remnant. They are attracted to negative emotions like sadness and fear, and cause destruction wherever they go. The only people who can slay the forces of Grimm are warriors known as hunters or huntresses, who develop their aura and semblance to fight off their rampage. Jesus Christ, that was a lot. With that being said, we can finally talk about the first season of RWBY. Beginning with... So after a long monologue covering some of what I said before, the series begins with young Ruby Rose, finding herself in the middle of a robbery of a dust shop. Our first antagonist, Roman Torchwick, wants this dust, but wasn't prepared for the anime 15-year-old wielding a giant scythe to stand in his way. Ruby hunts down Torchwick until Torchwick boards an airship to get away. However, to Ruby's aid, a woman in glasses comes to attack Torchwick. But to Torchwick's aid, another woman arrives to spit fire at the duo until they get away. Ruby is so impressed by the woman's actions, the one that helped her, not the one who attempted to harm her, that she doesn't even realize she's been placed under arrest for battery. But while this woman, who I will reveal as Glinda Goodwitch, is reviewing the footage of the attack, an unfamiliar man arrives. His name is Ozpin, and asks Ruby if she wants to go to his privileged school for raising hunters and huntresses. Ruby accepts, and she is moved ahead a couple years to be in Beacon Academy with her older sister Yang. While exploring campus, Ruby meets John, John meets Ruby, Ruby meets Weiss, and Weiss blows up. We take the time for the characters to meet up and talk to each other, leading us to a scene where Team RWBY interacts before they become Team RWBY. The next day, all the new students partake in a team building exercise where they will launch themselves into the forest and bond over near-death experiences. During this time, Team RWBY finally forms as they take on a giant bird, while Team Juniper forms as they fight against a giant scorpion. John becomes a leader, Ruby becomes a leader, and we end this saga 5 or 6 episodes into our 10 episode season. From here, we get side episodes where the team comes together. Ruby tries to be a better leader for Weiss, John learns to become a better leader, period, and we also get to see the seeds that begin the Jean x Puriship Arcos. This brings us to the finale. The Vital Festival is coming up, which is a huge event to celebrate our differences. And part of the festival is a competition between all 4 schools across Remnant in a tournament. And Weiss wants to get an edge on the tournament by spying on the competition coming to Vale. While heading to the dock, Team RWBY comes across a weird girl named Penny and this monkey man named Sun. Weiss acts rude and standoffish towards Sun for his monkey tail, which annoys the crap out of Blake. Later that night, Weiss is still going on about the filthy beasts and how all Faunuses are terrorists. Blake argues that Faunus are misguided and that Weiss is being a bigot. It is here where Weiss delivers her sad anime backstory, where she reveals that the Faunus have basically ruined her childhood. They would harm the Shnee Dust Company by stealing their train cars of dust, they would make her family and friends go missing, and because of their actions, Weiss has grown to hate them and what they stand for. So she believes all of them should stop being arrogant assholes and turn themselves in to the police. However, after hearing this emotional backstory, Blake calls her out and says that maybe she wouldn't have to do all that if people treated her kind with respect. However, this unintentionally reveals that Blake is a Faunus, and she runs away. As the episode comes to a close, Blake takes off her bow to reveal her black cat ears. As the next episode starts, Blake and Sun are having coffee where Blake gives her sad anime backstory. She was a former member of a group called the White Fang. They were an organization dedicated to civil rights for Faunus. However, in recent years, they've turned to more drastic measures to get their message across. When Blake learned of this, she left the White Fang. While this is going on, Ruby, Weiss, Yang, and Penny are looking for Blake. During this time, Weiss calls Blake's actions into question, but Yang calls her a racist as the two look around. Meanwhile, Ruby and Penny talk about the dynamics of the power of friendship. This all leads to Team RWBY, Sun, and Penny fighting off against Torchwick, who is commanding some White Fang grunts. Weiss and Blake reconnect, and Team RWBY are back together again, hell yeah! Meanwhile, Penny leaves and is escorted into a limousine. That is Volume 1 of RWBY. It isn't a long season, nor is it very complex, but it does its job well in setting up the character dynamics and showing off the great action that comes with the series. However, that being said, the animation is very stiff when not showing off cool action. They only have models for 12 characters, so whenever we get panning shots of crowds, we usually get a bunch of black silhouettes instead of a crowd. It wouldn't be that bad if the environments weren't well lighted. At the end of the day, Volume 1 was fun, and we'll see more of it in Volume 2. How time seems to fly as we re-enter RWBY with new developments. For one, we properly get a design for the lady at the beginning of Volume 1. Her name is Cinder. We also meet these two rapscallions, Emerald and Mercury. They instantly show they're bad guys by beating up a store clerk for a book. However, we can't focus on the bad guys, because Team RWBY and Team Juniper are having a badass anime showdown. Tables are breaking, food is flying, and Sun's teammate Neptune gets introduced and covered in grape soda. The team are rightfully punished, but while this is all going on, Ozpin meets with General Ironwood. Ironwood is the head of Atlas's army and their academy, and has come with his airships to protect Beacon. Ozpin states that this isn't a good idea, but Ironwood says that this is a security measure for the Vital Festival. As days pass, we get some cute moments that might come back later. For example, RWBY meets Cinder, Mercury, and Emerald as they infiltrate Beacon. Weiss gets her first nickname in the series, Ice Queen, and Team RWBY casually spoil the finale of Volume 3. I won't play the scene, because I don't want this scene to take away my job. But while this is all going on, Blake begins to stress out about the White Fang. Now that they're working with Torchwick, something big must be going on. The team eventually decide to help Blake by doing some detective work. The team splits up and work with Sun and Neptune to gather clues. RWBY and Weiss head off to the docks. Blake and Sun infiltrate a White Fang rally, and Yang and Neptune return to the club from the yellow trailer. Starting with RWBY and Weiss, the duo run into Penny, and Weiss takes off now that RWBY has another partner. RWBY and Penny learn of the new Atlas soldiers known as Paladins and Knights. But more importantly, a new ship drops, boys! This one being the ship of Penny and RWBY, with nuts and bolts. See, when Penny accidentally reveals that she is a robot and not a real girl, RWBY accepts Penny for who she is. RWBY also learns Ironwood's suspicions of the Vital Festival and how Penny works on a more detailed level. Moving on, we jump to Yang and Neptune. They fail to learn anything from Junior. Great. And finally, rounding out our teams, Blake and Sun get confirmation that Torchwick is working for the White Fang and was able to steal the latest Elysian tech, the Paladin. However, when Torchwick spots them in the crowd, Blake and Sun request backup as they flee the complex. This leads to Team RWBY reuniting to take down the Paladin in an epic anime showdown. We get to see cool team-up attacks that go on to inspire more ship names, like Ice Flower, Freezer Burn, Checkmate, Ladybug, and the Toxic One. The team managed to beat up the Paladin, but before they can detain Roman, a new ice cream colored girl arrives and vanishes with Torchwick. Her name's Neo, and she will become incredibly annoying moving forward. Taking a small break from Team RWBY for a bit, we see a battle between Pyrrha and Mercury during a training session. Pyrrha wins, but only because Mercury forfeits after sussing out her skill. After this, Jean and Pyrrha meet up on the school's roof for combat training, after Jean fails to ask out Weiss for the Vital Festival dance. The two have a heart-to-heart, but it ends with Jean not believing Pyrrha when she says that no one had asked her to the dance. He even tells Pyrrha that if she really doesn't have a date, he'll go to the dance in a dress. Okay, back to Team RWBY. Despite their victory against Roman, this isn't good enough for Blake. Blake believes that she has to use all her energy to pursue Roman along with the White Fang, ignoring the rest of the team's request to take a break for the sake of the mission. This all comes to a head in a scene that I like, but also hate at the same time. Up until this point, Yang has been the fun extrovert, who's a great older sister, and seeing Blake push herself so hard makes her worried. Yang tries to get Blake to take a break, but Blake scolds her and the rest of the team for not taking this seriously. This leads to Yang revealing her sad anime backstory. Yang understands how Blake feels because this is how she felt when she was young. Basically, Yang grew up with two different moms. The good mom was Summer Rose. She was super kind to the girls and made them fresh cookies. In Yang's words, she was Super Mom, the mom who stepped up. But then there was Yang's mom, Raven. When she was little, Raven left her and her dad, so Yang made it her mission to find her. She worked long and hard to find her until she finally came across a clue to her whereabouts. Taking little Ruby, who had been sleeping in a little wagon, Yang ventured alone to this location where she got ambushed by Grimm. She was too exhausted to run, too exhausted to fight, and she also had to protect a sleeping Ruby. She admits that the two of them should have been dead that night, if it weren't for their uncle coming at the last moment to save them. Yang tells Blake that if Roman or the White Fang were to attack right now, that she wouldn't win and act more as a liability in her current state. Yang's words finally break through to Blake and she decides to sit on those words. This scene is really well done and I really like it, which is why I hate that this scene has started my least favorite ship. I don't hate Bumblebee in theory, but I hate how it'll go on to hurt the series later on. But long story short, Blake comes to the dance to get her mind off things. Team Juniper do a dance with Jean wearing a white dress, and Ruby notices a suspicious person entering the communications tower. Unfortunately, Ruby doesn't catch the person, but at least the night ends off well. Alright, get ready, we're about to get introduced to a few more characters, with the best one being Zwei. Yeah! Zwei! Oh, and this team nobody actually cares about. I think it's called Team Coffee maybe? I don't know. Consisting of team leader Coco Adele, Fox Alistar, Velvet Scarlatina, and Yatsuhashi Daichi. They'll be important later, but until then, Team RWBY uncovers the White Fang hideout. In order to investigate, they disguise it as a field mission with their professor to study Grimm in the surrounding area. RWBY brings Zwei with her because she didn't want to leave him alone in the room while they were gone. On the trip, we get to explore the deeper side of Team RWBY thanks to their Professor Oobleck. We get to understand what each of the characters want. Weiss wants to uphold her family legacy, and after learning that she could fight, she found that there was no other choice but to follow in her sister's footsteps and become a huntress. However, this is a result of her family name that was muddied because of her stepdad. Blake wants to end the inequality and injustice in the world of Remnant, basically taking up the mantle of Batman to do so. But because of her self-doubts, she believes herself to be a coward instead of the hero she wants to be. Yang wants to travel around the world. She yearns for crazy adventures that come with traveling, and helping people is just an added benefit. But she also understands that this kind of lifestyle is carefree. She fears that these days will be fleeting and she won't be able to live this life that she desperately craves. And then RWBY gets to learn more about the Grimm, learning from Oobleck that the Grimm learn with their age, and he wants to change the world through knowledge instead of power. Alright, come on. And then we finally get to learn about Ruby Rose, right? Sorry, that was mean. But RWBY gets so little development that we have to learn more about her from Yang than RWBY. Basically, we learn that RWBY wants to be a hero, specifically the heroes in the books they tell us in fairy tales. But don't worry, because RWBY does do a thing. After picking up a scent, Zwei leads RWBY into the White Fang hideout. RWBY tells Zwei to get everyone else, and while she explores the base, she finds Grimm and Torchwick leading everyone. RWBY believes that Roman is planning to transfer stolen goods using the train. So once the rest of the team and Oobleck arrive, the team goes to work to stop the train. However, with the train taking off, the group has to stop it before it reaches their destination. But RWBY was wrong! The train isn't carrying stolen cargo, the train is a series of bombs! The real plan is for the train to blow up, leading a legion of strong Grimm into Vale. More paladins show up to stop the team, but Oobleck tells the girls that he, RWBY, and Zwei can handle them.
Fireball.
Inside the train cars, we get 3 fights back to back. Weiss versus Chainsaw Man, Yang versus Neo, and Blake versus Torchwick. And Team RWBY loses 2-1. Weiss gets her ass kicked, Blake stops Torchwick, but Yang loses to Neo. But before Neo can get the kill, A woman with a creepy mask appears from a portal to save Yang. After Neo escapes, the woman decides to leave Yang in the train car. The team do their best to stop the train, but the train ends up crashing and Grimm gets sent into Vale. There are too many for Team RWBY and Oobleck to handle on their own, so they assemble the Avengers to aid in the fight. Team Juniper arrive to aid in the carnage, Sun and Neptune arrive to put the pedal to the metal, Team Coffee do a thing, even Cinder, Mercury, and Emerald aid in the fight, if only to maintain their cover. But during the fight, Coco tells Velvet not to join. This is for something cool they want to do later. But Team RWBY save the day. Roman gets sent to prison, and all is right in the world. Right? Well, no, there's a few more things that happen. General Ironwood has rising concerns with the safety of the Vital Festival, with the increase of crime in Vale, not including the recent attack that just happened. Cinder, Mercury, and Emerald are still scheming in the background, and it doesn't help that the guy in the black trailer comes to join their side. His name is Adam, by the way. And Yang confronts the person who saved her, and it's revealed to be her mom! Ah, it's Raven Broadwood, ah. Apparently, they have a lot to talk about, but we don't see it till the start of the next volume. Volume 2 of RWBY was an improvement on Volume 1. The choreography was great, there are no longer shadow people in the background, and the music just continues to slap. More importantly, they're starting to get a good foundation for the story that RWBY wants to tell. It feels like a natural continuation of one that grows from its weak points. But with the next season, there'll be a lot more to talk about when we cover... On a crispy fall day, we see RWBY talking to a tombstone that appeared in Red Trailer. This gravesite belongs to her mother, and RWBY recaps the story up until now to her. And after telling her mom goodbye, we get the main setting for Volume 3. The Vital Tournament! The tournament is broken up into brackets, placing teams from the 4 schools of Remnant against each other. The rules are quite simple. Each team will fight against one another, and the longer the tournament goes on, the fewer teammates partake in the match. So for this 3-round tournament, it'll be divided into a team battle, a duos battle, and a singles battle. You lose if you're knocked out of the arena, or if your aura is brought down to 15% of its total. They calculate this with special Atlassian tech. And the first stomp we get to see is Team Auburn and Team RWBY. We also see Team Juniper is doing well, as they clear the match against Team Bronze. After a smashing win, the teams get food where RWBY runs into Emerald. This is just to clarify that Emerald is indeed evil when she talks smack about RWBY behind her back. Meanwhile, Team RWBY have to get bailed out on food from Team Juniper, because Weiss has been cut off from the Schnee funds. Weiss believes this is because of her dad, since he's been flooding her DMs to talk. But we don't care about that, because another character gets introduced to the story. It's this drunk guy at a bar. His name is Crow, and his semblance makes his life worse by giving him super high school level bad luck. But he, along with Weiss's sister, Winter, go to visit their family attending Beacon. This leads to a fight breaking out in front of the school where Crow and Winter duke it out. However, all this fight does is embarrass Winter in front of her boss, General Ironwood. Speaking of the General, his scroll gets unknowingly hacked by Cinder with the help of someone named Watts. With this power at her fingertips, Cinder rigs the fights by manipulating the matches taking place, letting her team progress through the tournament on a steady pace to the finale. During this time, however, we get some nice bonding between parental figures. Winter aids Weiss in her training by having her begin to develop her summoning jutsu. Meanwhile, Crow is bonding with his nieces Yang and RWBY by playing video games and talking about their family, Team Stark. And I don't mean that in a metaphorical way. Team Stark is Yang and RWBY's family, consisting of team leader Summer Rose, Taiyang Zhaolong, and siblings Raven and Crow Bronwyn. After this stunning display of emotions, RWBY runs into Penny and her teammate Sayel after their match in the tournament. The two are based off of Pinocchio and Jiminy Cricket, and I'll let you take a guess on what Sayel's role is here. Anyway, through this interaction, RWBY learns that Penny wants to transfer to Beacon, to be with her bestie every day. She hopes that she could talk Ironwood into making the switch for it, and RWBY wishes her luck as she goes off to see her team take another dub in the tournament. Say goodbye to Sayel, everyone! She will never return after this fight. For this fight, we see Freezerburn and 2 members of Team Funky go head to head. After this fight, 2 important things happen. 1. Cinder learns about the schematics for a little robot who happens to be taking part in the tournament. Second, Pyrrha gets called into Ozpin's office to discuss a pretty important matter. As Pyrrha arrives, she notices that besides Ozpin and Good Witch, there are also Crow and Ironwood. Pyrrha learns some pretty hefty lore about the outside world. Pyrrha learns that 4 magical girls called Maidens who actually manipulate magic, and no, I'm not talking about dust or some complicated semblance, I'm talking magic. Straight up. Their magic is connected to the seasons, spring, summer, fall, and winter. The maiden trait is only passed down through people in the last thoughts of the previous maiden. However, the trait is gender locked to female characters, because men can't become maidens. The reason why Ozpin tells Pyrrha all of this is because one of the previous maidens had been attacked by someone who stole half of her power. She is under intense care, and Ozpin wants Pyrrha to try and inherit her power. Pyrrha initially agrees to all of this, but gets cold feet after learning the process. See, what Ozpin plans to do is transfer the Fall Maiden's aura into Pyrrha through some high-tech, presumably Atlesian, machine. This plan has high risks since this process could irreversibly change Pyrrha, to the point where she may not even be the same person after it. This all scares the poor girl, and she decides to sit on it before jumping straight in. Cutting back to the tournament, RWBY tells her sister to break a leg in her solo fight against Mercury. However, Yang takes this advice literally and breaks Mercury's leg with her shotgun gauntlets. This was all a trap designed by Cinder to knock out both teams in the tournament, by using Emerald's semblance to trick Yang into believing Mercury was attacking her. Mercury is escorted out in the ship, but it's revealed that Mercury's leg is fine, mostly because they're robotic. With all this confusion, it's time we get some backstory. So, Cinder went around recruiting people for her grand plan. The Straight Rat and Emerald with a powerful semblance. Mercury Black, after finding out Marcus Black was killed by his own son. And Adam Taurus and Roman Torchwick for manpower and supplies. Cinder, Mercury, and Emerald manage to ambush the Fall Maiden and steal some of her power for Cinder, but they are unable to take all of it before Crow arrives to stop the trio. Together, the team plan for an event so unspeakable that you'll have to wait like 5 minutes before it actually takes place. Back to the present, Team RWBY are confined to their rooms when Ironwood tells the girls that they've been disqualified. RWBY and Weiss believe that Yang didn't attack an innocent person on purpose, but Blake is quick to doubt her. Blake tells Yang that her actions reminded her of some phonics that she used to know, who acted cruel but played it off with charm and soft words. So Blake has Yang promise her that what she said did in fact happen and isn't lying. After this conversation, Yang is left alone with Crow, where the two talk about Raven. Crow explains to Yang that her mother lives on a system that saves people she's close to once. After that, she cuts them off in an extreme tough love approach. Meanwhile, Pyrrha is stressing out from the new information and the next fight, and it doesn't help that Nora and Ren are aggressively trying to psych her up for her next fight. However, it's with John she manages to de-stress about everything. In a touching moment with the two of them alone, the two talk about destiny. Pyrrha hopes that this conversation will help her in her decision of becoming the maiden, but Jean's words hurt Pyrrha, and she runs off after blowing up at him. We then cut to the finals. Penny Paulandina versus Pyrrha Nikos of Team Juniper. RWBY is walking towards the bleachers when she comes across Mercury walking around. While Emerald is using her semblance on Pyrrha, RWBY and Mercury get into a scuffle. RWBY manages to escape Mercury and flees towards the arena. However, as she arrives, she witnesses Pyrrha break Penny into quarters with her own weapon. The arena is left in silence, buying time for Mercury and Emerald to flee from the crowds. But before anyone can do anything, the monitors in the crowd turn red, and with a black chess piece in the center. Cinder then gives a monologue, which I will reenact for you here, right now. Ahem. This is not a tragedy. This is not an accident. This is what happens when you hand your trust over, your safety, your children, to men who claim to be your guardians, but are in reality nothing more than men. Our academy's headmaster wielded more power than most armies, and one was audacious enough to hold both. They cling to this power in the name of peace, and yet, what do we have here? One nation's attempt to bring a synthetic army mercilessly torn apart by another star pupil. What need would Atlas have for a soldier disguised as an innocent little girl? I don't think the Grimm can tell the difference. And what, I ask you, is Ozpin teaching his students? First a dismemberment, now this? huntsmen and huntresses should carry themselves with honor and mercy. Yet I have witnessed neither. Perhaps Ozpin felt as though defeating Atlas in the tournament would help people forget his colossal failure to protect Vale when the Grimm invaded its streets. Or perhaps this was his message to the tyrannical dictator that has occupied an unsuspecting kingdom with armed forces. Honestly, I haven't the slightest clue as to who is right and who is wrong, but I know that the existence of peace is fragile, and the leaders of our kingdoms conduct their business with iron gloves. As someone who hails from Mistral, I can assure you, the situation there is equally undesirable. Our kingdoms are on the brink of war, yet we, the citizens, are left in the dark. So I ask you, when the first shots are fired, who do you think you can trust? With that, chaos ensues. Grimm are launched into Beacon, Neo breaks out Torchwick, and together they hack the Atlas Knights to turn on themselves, and the innocent civilians. Adam and the White Fang skydrop Grimm into the ports to prevent escape. It's pure insanity, but Team RWBY are on the case. Weiss and Blake make their way to the docks, while RWBY rallies the remaining students to fight along with the now traumatized Pyrrha. And Yang, well, she's still finding her way to the battlefield. Ironwood plans escape routes for the students who don't want to fight, and while he's doing that, RWBY is using her locker to launch herself at the main ship where Torchwick and Neo are. Arriving at the dock, Weiss and Blake split up to take on the corrupted Atlas soldiers and the Grimm. This results in Weiss meeting up with some of the students to fight another paladin, while Blake has to fight a flash from her past. As Pyrrha, John, and Ozpin make their way to the Fall Maiden, a giant wyvern-like Grimm soars over the school, dropping black puddles to spawn in more Grimm. Alright, let's tackle these conflicts one at a time. With the Paladin, Velvet finally fights with the group, using her camera to recreate moments across RWBY up until now. This inspires Weiss to unlock Summoning. It's not terribly strong yet, but it'll grow stronger with time. RWBY manages to send Neo flying, but only by making use of her umbrella on an airship. RWBY and Torchwick fight for a bit, and RWBY is on the back foot. However, right before the fight ends, we get some pretty important lines that'll come back later.
You got Spirit Red, but this is the real world! The real world is cold! The real world doesn't care about spirit! You want to be a hero? Then play the part and die like every other huntsman in history! As for me, I'll do what I do best. Lie, steal, cheat, and survive!
This will come back later, and I will not let you forget. Back to Jean and Pyrrha. Pyrrha begins the aura transfer with Jean on the lookout. However, with Cinder as Jean's opponent, it's no wonder why Cinder kills the maiden and reclaims the other half of her power. Ozpin tells Pyrrha and Jean to leave, leaving Ozpin and Cinder to duke it out in an off-screen anime battle. Yang finally arrives on scene, only to find Blake losing in her fight against Adam. Yang gets pissed and charges to attack, but Adam disarms her by slicing off her arm. Adam leaves, and Blake and Yang are left unconscious in the ruined building. Luckily, Weiss manages to save the duo, and gets help to drag them to safety. Jean and Pyrrha escape into the chaos, but Cinder tracks him down. Pyrrha decides to battle Cinder alone, and keeps Jean safe by launching him in a rocket locker. RWBY finally returns, only to see her broken down team. The White Fang are starting to depart due to the overabundance of Grimm, and there are still people missing. And as if on cue, RWBY receives a call from a distressed Jean telling her to save Pyrrha. Cinder and Pyrrha fight a hard battle, but Cinder wins by targeting Pyrrha's Achilles heel. Pyrrha asks Cinder if she believes in destiny, and Cinder smugly answers yes, as she places a hand on Pyrrha's head. As RWBY arrives on the scene, she witnesses Pyrrha dissolve into ash by Cinder's hand. Emotions cross through RWBY's mind. First Penny's death, then Yang and Blake's injuries, then this. A new power awakens and a burning light escapes of RWBY's eyes. Cinder is shocked, and suddenly the scene is drowned in light. Time passes, and eventually RWBY wakes up in her home of Patch and Vale, surrounded by her father and uncle. Tai leaves at Crow's request, and Crow fills Ruby in of the events that happened after her little meltdown. The wyvern that attacked Beacon had become petrified, and Cinder couldn't be found from the wreckage. However, whatever they did knocked out the communication across the world of Remnant. Crow also informs Ruby about a story about uber powerful warriors. Apparently they all had silver eyes and could destroy all Grimm with a single glance. However, as time went on, these warriors were hunted for their rare trait, and only a few people of this trait remain. Crow leaves after his story, but not before telling Ruby to avoid Haven Academy, as he and his associates will investigate there first with Beacon's fall. From here, Ruby goes to check in on her sister. Yang tells Ruby that the team split. Weiss was sent home per her father's request, and Blake ran to parts unknown. Ruby asks if Yang is okay, but it's really clear that Yang is not okie dokie. As the season comes to a close, Ruby, Jean, Nora, and Ren depart for Haven to follow Crow's advice, and we learn that Crow can turn into a burb. Oh, we also have this woman who looks like a Grimm, who encourages man's fall for their own vices. Volume 3 is honestly great. The stakes, the relationships, the drama, oh, chef's kiss. And the animation has finally caught up to the storytelling, creating a perfect finale that hasn't been replicated to date to be H. To be quite H. To be quite really. But that being said,
You peaked.
What?
You peaked.
You're kidding! After all that?
Yeah, sorry.
this is the moment where Ruby gets extremely divisive. And part of that comes with the death of the show's creator, Monty Oum. I can't say anything in regards to Monty as a person, but Monty's work shows fantastically across these 3 volumes, and Ruby hasn't felt the same since his untimely departure. But that being said, his work in these 3 volumes are still celebrated to this day, as far as I know. As the show grew, the action and animation grew with it, and excelled beyond expectations. Monty was able to make fans love, laugh, and cry over his work. And with him gone, let's just hope that the rest of the series can carry his spirit. Starting with
I still don't think that's what a sloth sounds like.
Volume 4 begins with this woman from the end of Volume 3. Her name is Salem, and from here on out, she will be the main antagonist for the rest of the series. We see her full team consisting of a few familiar faces and some new ones, including, but not limited to, Tyrion, Hazel, and this new guy named Watts. I might have mentioned him before, but I don't know. Also, Cinder is revealed to be alive! Hopefully this doesn't become a running trend, but Cinder didn't leave the Battle of Beacon unscathed. Her eye was damaged, her arm was damaged, she lost her voice. Well, that last one is only temporary, though. Similar to getting the wind knocked out of you, if anything. Salem plans for Cinder to take a rest after her success in Beacon, with Mercury and Emerald doing the same. Meanwhile, Watts is being sent to Mistral for future endeavors, and Hazel is being sent to check in on Adam and the White Fang. Tyrion is given the task to hunt down Ruby Rose and bring her personally to Salem alive. From here, the story is divided into 4 different plots, following the 4 protagonists. We'll follow them in this order: white, yellow, black, red. Only because the plot-heavy one should be saved for last. Oh, and before I dive into this, we also meet this young farm boy who serves 0 purpose to the plot later. Source: I made it the fuck up. So starting with Weiss, we get to see her family's dynamics, starting with her little brother Whitley. Whitley is a little bit of a smug asshole, very reminiscent of Weiss in Volume 1, but with a twinge of passive aggressiveness. Weiss decides to meet with her stepfather and overhears an argument from her father's chambers. She hears about Ironwood's new dust embargo on Atlas, as a security measure after the events of the fall of Beacon. As Ironwood leaves, he greets Weiss and offers her a place in Atlas Academy, seeing her achievements of greatness during the fall. With Ironwood gone, Weiss and her stepdad Jock discuss the charity event for the fall of Beacon. Weiss, who's still uneasy after the fall, really isn't motivated to perform, but Jacques tells her that she must for the benefit of the company's brand and image. Depressed, Weiss leaves Jacques' chambers and runs into her only ally in these trying times. This is Klein, and his semblance allows him to be the 7 dead. and his semblance allows him to be the seven dwarfs to Weiss's Snow White. He's a butler to Schnee Manor and aids Weiss whenever she's upset. While we wait for time to pass, let's talk about this farmhand from before. His name is Oscar, and he seems like a stable work hand. However, one day, after a long day's work, Oscar begins hearing strange voices in his head. I think he's going crazy. But back to the plot. After singing the ironic choice of This Life Is Mine at the charity event, Weiss finds herself at the after party full of more rich assholes. But after hearing one rich lady disrespect the events of Beacon, Weiss accidentally summons a grim boar in anger. Ironwood shoots the boar, killing the summon, and the lady demands Weiss be thrown in jail. But Ironwood defends Weiss's honor by explaining how cruel everyone is being in this sensitive situation. However, Weiss did make an embarrassing scene at the charity event, and this act does not go unpunished. Back at home, Weiss tries to tell her father that she wants to leave Atlas, but her disrespectful mouth gets slapped by Jacques in a scene that portrays him as abusive. Jacques grounds Weiss for her scene and proceeds to punish her further by stripping her of her title as heiress to the Schnee Dust Company, giving that title to Whitley. With newfound time and freedom, Weiss begins to practice her summoning jutsu, until she can finally manifest the knight she fought during her white trailer. As Weiss prepares to escape, Klein decides to aid Weiss by giving her an escape route. Weiss also manages to hear another argument between Jacques and Ironwood, learning that Ironwood plans to try to shut down the borders of Atlas and Mantle, and sending Winter down to Mantle to aid however she can. However, that's all she manages to hear before fleeing the Schnee Manor and escaping Atlas. Now on to Yang's story. This one is the most boring of the four. After the events of Volume 3, Yang has been left home brooding and suffering from PTSD of Adam. Tai tries to cheer her up by presenting her a gift from General Ironwood. As a reward for her efforts during the fall of Beacon, Ironwood sent her a new prosthetic limb straight from Atlas. It's state-of-the-art quality with no strings attached. Yang thanks her dad for the gift, but she doesn't try on the new arm. While this is going on, Oscar learns that the voice in his head belongs to the headmaster of Beacon Academy named Ozpin. Hey, that sounds familiar. Ozpin begins telling Oscar to head to Haven for something important going on. However, Oscar rejects the call to action, believing that he's starting to go crazy. And honestly, I would too. Anyway, back to Yang. One night, she overhears her dad talking to people. Upon entering the kitchen, she finds Tai talking to Professor Oobleck and Professor Port. I know I mentioned Oobleck before, but Port was responsible for kickstarting Weiss's development for respecting RWBY as a leader. Anyway, the important thing to note here is that these two help Tai help encourage Yang to get up after falling down.
Hey, Jeets. I heard you lost your fight pretty bad. But you know what they say, Vegeta. When you fall off that horse, you get right back up and you eat that horse. Come eat that horse with me, Vegeta.
After the pep talk from her former professors, Yang puts on her new arm and begins training with Tai again, just to get back on her feet. Tai offers some advice to Yang to not overexert her semblance. Bernie is supposed to help her during a tight spot and not to be used as a temper tantrum. This is some sound advice, but if we think about the times where Yang has used her semblance, this doesn't quite make sense. As far as I can recall, Yang's major fights where she used burn was during the Paladin fight against Torchwick and the Mercury fight in Volume 3. And in both cases, Yang has used her semblance appropriately during the fight. Maybe I'm missing something, but just doesn't make sense. But back to the story. Yang finally grows enough to get back on her feet and spray paints her new arm to match her weapons. Yang is prepared to leave, but Tai stops her to ask her where she's going. We never hear the answer to this, but as Yang arrives at a crossroad, she seemingly drives in the direction that points to RWBY, and not her mom. Now, starting with the major story stuff, we cut to Blake as she's on a boat heading to a remote island. While on the boat, she finally rids herself of the bow she used to hide her identity for so long. But before Blake can relax, her ship is attacked by some sea serpent Grim. Blake tries her best to fight it off, but is saved by Sun, who comes in to take it out. After saving her, Sun is rewarded for saving Blake's life. No, he's not. He gets slapped for following her. This will begin an unfortunate arc for the good man. But how's Oscar doing? We cut back to Oscar on the road telling Ozpin to shut up while he's heading to Haven Academy. Arriving at a train station, Oscar tries to buy a ticket to Mistral, but Hazel arrives and gives him a ticket. I don't remember if Hazel sticks around, but I'm pretty sure he doesn't. Anyway, Blake and Sun arrive at the island of Menagerie. Menagerie is a fauna safe haven off the outskirts of Mistral that is borderline unlivable. 80% of the island is an inhabitable desert, leaving 20% of the island for the furry community to survive. Blake's family happens to be the most respectable family in the community, having the biggest house on Menagerie. Upon arriving home, Blake is greeted with open arms from her mother and father. However, the Black Sun ship gets some fuel as her parents have mixed reactions to him.
Love it.
It's also here that we learn the history of the White Fang. See, back in the days when Blake's father was part of the White Fang, the group was dedicated to peaceful protest. It's only because of the new blood like Adam that they took a radical turn, seeing the results that came from his ideology. Speaking of the White Fang, 2 members of the Menagerie White Fang arrive and confirm that they are against the actions Adam has taken. We will see later if these 2 White Fang members are really against Adam's regime. Blake has some father-daughter time with her dad, where she apologizes for calling them catwords, and following Adam for a small time. Sun also hears this, but is only here for comedic effect. Later that night, Sun offers that Blake try and contact the rest of Team RWBY for support. This leads to some Sun abuse right before the duo are attacked by a White Fang member. It's revealed that this girl's name is Ilya, and during the fight she critically wounds Sun before escaping. Blake manages to carry Sun back home and bring him back to health. After regaining consciousness, Blake then goes on to hurl insults at Sun for being stupid and risking his life for her. Blake then proceeds to explain that the only reason that she left before was because she didn't want people to get hurt because of her past mistakes. However, Sun argues with her, telling her that by shutting herself away from others and refusing to let others in, she refuses to let others aid her in her trying times. You know, the whole, "you can't do this alone," and "you need to rely on others" spiel. Almost like the conversation Yang and Blake have in Volume 2. This is a really sweet moment to build up the Black Sun dynamic. However, similar to Sun spying before, Blake's parents do the same on the Ecliptic duo. After this silly scene, Blake's father, who I only just learned is named Gira, fills in the two on a rumor surrounding Adam. Apparently, the young radicalist is planning on killing off the current leader of the White Fang to take their role and plan a siege on Haven Academy, a siege similar to the fall of Beacon. Hearing this, Blake finds a new resolve to stop Adam once and for all, before more people can suffer. And that brings us to the team leader, Ruby Rose, and the adventures of Team Ranger. Yeah, they had a whole moment where they contemplated Junior over Ranger, but thankfully they went this route. Jean finally gets new armor upgrades, using the remnants of Pyrrha's armor as forging material. In fact, we get a lot of scenes where we see Jean reflecting on Pyrrha's death, and working to improve himself with her former teachings. We also have a scene to set up the team's plot as they travel through the ruined town, thanks to the Grimm. We cut to Crow as he hooks up with his sister at the bar. Not like that, we're not in Alabama, sickos. Crow explains to Raven that he's been following Team Ranger to keep them safe. Raven finds this hilarious, as a semblance is putting them in more danger than anything they could deal with. This leads to a back and forth where Crow calls Raven a horrible mom for abandoning her daughter, while Raven subtly tries to extract information from Crow on current events. This whole exchange ends with Raven giving her angsty life philosophy of the strong live and the weak die. Team Ranger eventually comes across another ruined town thanks to the Grimm, but also come across Tyrion. The four fight, but they have a hard time keeping up with the trained killer. Crow finally makes his presence known and aids the team in their fight against Tyrion. However, as the fight comes to a close, Tyrion manages to prick Crow with his scorpion tail, before fleeing for his life. Later that night, Crow decides to fill in Team Ranger to the world at hand. The Maidens, Salem, all that he knows. Jean takes this news about as you'd expect, and begins to blame Crow and Oz for Pyrrha's death. But Crow ignores Jean to focus on Ruby, and how with her silver ice being used at Beacon, drew unwanted attention towards her. Crow then begins to explain the importance of the Maidens in a story about two brothers. Basically, in your world history lesson, the world was formed by two brothers, of light and Dark. The older brother of Light sought to create things, while the younger brother of Dark chose to create things to destroy his brother's creations. You know, typical family dynamic. The two brothers decide to work together to create something, and end up creating mankind. Mankind is blessed with 4 gifts: creation, destruction, knowledge, and choice. These blessings later being symbolized with 4 artifacts: the Staff of Creation, the Sword of Destruction, the Lamp of Knowledge, and the Crown of Choice. The academies were born from a desire to protect the relics from getting into Salem's hands, and the maidens were the final key necessary to actually getting your hands on one of these relics. Crow warns the group that information like this is incredibly dangerous, as a single whisper of this getting out to the public would start a wildfire that would throw the world into chaos, creating more Grimm and giving Salem more power. Crow also begins to apologize for his involvement in all this. His semblance, bad luck charm, may have made them come into contact with dangerous situations during their travels. Passively, Crow's semblance always guarantees the worst case scenario, even on basic things. The next day dawns and Crow isn't doing any better than the day before. With little time on their hands, Team Ranger quickly carry Crow to Mistral for help. However, the group arrives at a crossroad. To the right, a dangerous pass that will quickly get them to Mistral. To the left, a longer route that would take them through a town called Kuroyuri. Ren and Nora are adamant about not going through there, but seeing the other path is too dangerous to carry Crow through, the team split up and Ruby and John carry Crow through Kuroyuri. As Ruby and John arrive at Kuroyuri, we finally get another sad anime backstory. Not for these two, but for Ren and Nora. Short version, Child Ren is a dick to homeless child Nora, which causes him to get scolded by his father. Child Ren then manages to save young homeless Nora's life during a Grimm attack that makes Ren an orphan. As the two of them escape Kuroyuri, with Ren's newly unlocked semblance, an eerie roar lingers in the air. The reason why this is important is because Jean and Ruby must now face off against the monster that destroyed Kuroyuri and made Ren an orphan, the Ukalabi. However, the two aren't fighting alone as Ren and Nora arrive after seeing the beast's den. Meanwhile, Tyrion finally returns home to Salem as she's testing out Cinder's new maiden abilities. Salem hits Tyrion with the "I'm not mad, just disappointed." And this causes Tyrion to lose it as he begins senselessly slaughtering Grimm. Even Cinder is concerned about his reaction. We cut back to the group as Ren finally overcomes his anime backstory and slays the Nukalavi. And with its defeat, the team hears airships coming to their aid. The team is saved and Flower Power over here gets confirmed with the two holding hands. Ain't that precious. While relaxing at an inn, Ruby sends out a letter to her dad and Yang about her adventure so far and her way to Haven Academy. Crow recovers and heads to the bar, but oh no! It's revealed that the headmaster of Haven is working with Watts. I wonder what'll happen next. Oh yeah, I didn't talk about Oscar yet. Well, that's because while Crow is at the bar, he is approached by some weird farm boy who seems to be talking to himself. The farm boy asks Crow for his cane back, and Crow tells the boy that it's nice to see Oz again. That is the entire abridged take of Volume 4, and trust me, it's better that I introduce the plotlines like this than how the show did. The show has a hard time juggling these 4 plots around, and if I presented it straight, we'd be jumping all over the place. Not only that, but while I understand what they were trying to do with Blake, Sun gets beat up for being a kind person. It paints Blake as an insufferable dickhead to those who care about her. Also, Yang's storyline doesn't get as fleshed out compared to the other 4, but that being said, Volume 4 feels like a natural follow-up to Volume 3, breaking down the characters' thoughts and feelings after the fall of Beacon, especially Jean, who lost not only his waifu, but his friend and mentor. To pull a game theory, we learn about the lore of Remnant and how the maidens play a key role in all of this. It's quite interesting, even if the volume isn't that great by comparison. But let's hope that RWBY picks up steam with the next volume. Picking up where we left off, we need to start back with RWBY's side of the story. See, the little bit I mentioned at the end of Volume 4 had a little bit more meat to it before I got to that point. After taking care of Crow, the full team head to Haven Academy to meet with the headmaster Lionheart. Lionheart tells the group that Mistral and Atlas have had a bit of a struggling relationship, developing as a result of Ironwood's ever-increasing security measures. And the cherry on top of all of this, they managed to locate the Spring Maiden. However, they fled from the overwhelming pressure and responsibility that came with being the Maiden. Crow deduces that the Spring Maiden is most likely with Raven, and tries to convince Lionheart to let them take some soldiers to raid her bandit hideout. Lionheart says that he'll need time to prepare for something like that, with his med wildly spread out. Pause. As the team leave, Jean sighs at the fact that they can't get more information about Cinder and her goons. With the team gone, Lionheart contacts Salem and reports about Cranger's With the team gone, Lionheart contacts Salem about Cranger's appearance and the location of the Spring Maiden. Salem proceeds to remind Lionheart that if he ever plans to betray her, she will dispose of him before hanging up the grim telephone. With this news, Salem orders Mercury, Emerald, and Cinder to find Raven Bronwyn's band of bandits. And whatever Ruby did back in Volume 3 must have given Cinder some serious brain damage, as she seemingly goes from competent calculating threat to an impulsive brute. We then see the post-credit scene from Volume 4, followed by a drunk Crow excitedly bringing Oscar to the rest of Team Ranger. The team is confused, but with a quick change in the eyes that I couldn't do justice to, Ozpin begins to speak through Oscar. Ozpin explains that while yes, he did die in the fight with Cinder, he is cursed to move between souls of man whenever he falls, merging with their consciousness until the former souls erased into Ozpin's being. Ozpin then proceeds to tell the group that now that there's downtime, they should continue to train. Ozpin notes that Ruby would be ineffective in a scenario where she were to lose Crescent Rose. Jean, for all his developments, hasn't unlocked his semblance yet, but more importantly, Oscar needs to train in order to make use of his full fighting experience. With this said, Ozpin returns to Oscar's subconscious, and the team begins to develop their skills. And the only thing left to know is that during this time of training, we get a moment where Ruby finally reflects on the events of Beacon. But this moment isn't to develop her character, as it's more to inspire Oscar to keep up with the group. For the time being, that is all you need to know on Ruby's end. I mean, Crow tries to do stuff, but all it shows is how his semblance is constantly fucking him over, and how the show barely puts any effort towards the fondest racism across Remnant. We now move to Weiss and Yang, as these two stories somehow meld together. Weiss manages to take an airship out of Atlas as she plans a course to Vale. She manages to pick up a new summon after defeating a grim bee, but in the end, Weiss gets kidnapped by Raven's bandits after her ship crashes. Yang, who was believed to be driving towards Mistral on her bike, actually drives off to the bandits in pursuit of Raven. Weiss gets thrown in a cage as Raven discusses the idea of returning her to her father for a pretty hefty coin. Even this new girl named Renal tells Weiss that no one is coming to save her, and she'll be lucky if she leaves this camp in one piece. But thankfully, Yang arrives and tells her mom to take her and Weiss to Ruby, her logic being that Crow is watching over her and she can use her semblance to take them to Crow, and thus to Ruby. However, I don't think Yang would know this since Ruby's letter wouldn't have reached her by the time she left. And if we use the Volume 3 note that Ruby left behind, it's still a stretch to consider that Ruby is with Crow, since Ruby only stated she was following his trail to Mistral, not implying that Crow was with her at all. Unless she's saying to make a direct portal to Ruby, which also doesn't make sense because of how Raven's semblance works. Listen, we need to find a way to get Weiss and Yang to Ruby, and this was the only way the writers knew how that also gave Yang some encounter with her mom. However, Raven instead invites Yang and her friend into the tent as she proceeds to lore dump her side of the story to them, basically saying that Oz is evil and they shouldn't trust him. Raven tells Freezerburn that Ozpin enrolled her and her brother, even though their plan was to kill Huntsman. This does nothing to dissuade the duo from leaving, so Raven creates a portal, warning the two that the next time they meet, there will be blood. Also, let's just note that Yang's whole journey with her mom ends here, and she never gets closure with it. So Weiss and Yang team up with Team Ranger and officially become the fan-made title, Team Orange Crow. The two sides exchange information, and forces Ozpin to come back to give the team some answers. Ozpin talks again through Oscar and explains that he comes from a long-forgotten time where people had magic. Not specialized dust abilities or something akin to maidens, I'm talking full-on magic. So with his magical prowess, he managed to gift Crow and Raven the ability to turn into birds. This seemingly beneficial ability is looked at with disgust by the team and pisses off Yang for some reason. But this all boils into a conclusion where Yang makes everyone agree to keep things truthful from here on out. No more lies, no more half-truths, only flat-out honesty. We will check in later to see if the statement holds true. Ozpin agrees to her terms, and life returns to normal as the team reconnect. We even get a moment between Freezerburn where, like with Ruby before, Yang expresses her frustrations with Blake abandoning the team, after the events of Volume 3. However, Weiss manages to reason with Yang, telling her that Blake must have her own side of the story that the team doesn't know about. Right now, the team needs to be ready to accept her with open arms when she's ready to return. That is about as much as I can cover there until we cover Blake's portion, because everything will come together once we learn of the events that occur in Menagerie. So Blake eventually meets up with Ilya in an attempt to explain her plan to her and convince Ilya to stop while she's ahead. But similar to Blake's resolve to stop Adam, Ilya is steadfast in her beliefs to stop Blake from ruining the revolution. Meanwhile, we cut to the base of the White Fang, where the leader Sienna Khan is scolding Adam for his radicalism and his plan to attack Haven Academy. But just as soon as this cool character is introduced, she is swiftly backstabbed by Adam, who usurps her as head of the White Fang. Hazel, who is also here, notes how disgusting the kill was, as he states that no one had to die here. A new day dawns and Gira tries to rally the Faunus against the actions of Adam, but Ilya interferes and begins to discredit the words of the former White Fang leader. She manages to rally the Faunus against Blake's family and join with Adam's revolution, leaving Blake and Sun unable to recruit anyone to their cause, and Blake left to worry about Ilya's safety. Ilya eventually reports back to Adam and the two goons that visited the Belladonna house before, and is given the task to kill Blake's family. After this, Blake gets a message from Ilya to meet with her in private about something important. Blake meets up with Ilya and gets caught in her obvious ambush. In a weird moment, Ilya confesses her true feelings to Blake and explains that if she's not with her, then she's her enemy. But Blake turns the tables and reveals that she's not alone. Sun then arrives from shadows to save Blake. Ilya flees from the duo, and Black Sun chases after her back to Blake's home. Blake and Ilya fight a one-on-one where Blake happens to light a fire during the conflict. Don't ask me why she does this, because apparently Faunus have night vision. Blake finally manages to reach through to Ilya, and as the duo leave the burning building, they come across a huge crowd looking at the damages. Blake explains that this is all the White Fang's fault, and rallies the Faunus to her side to stop Adam before he ruins the name of the Faunus for the general public. And with all this explained, we can now get to the end of the volume. Cinder and her goons arrive at Raven's camp and search for the Spring Maiden. Raven tells Cinder that Renal is the Spring Maiden and offers her a hand in getting the relic in exchange for her brother's death. Cinder agrees and begins a full assault on Haven Academy. Back to Orange Crow, Crow and Oscar receive a letter from Lionheart to meet at Haven for his support. Crow and Oz manage to see through this letter and recognize it for the trap that it is. Ruby is concerned if this means the relic is in danger, but Oz tells Ruby that she should have nothing to worry about. With no other leads to go on, Orange Crow head to Haven and preps for the worst. The team is ambushed by Raven, who summons Cinder, Mercury, Emerald, and Hazel to Haven. John proceeds to have an outburst where he calls out Cinder for being a horrible human being, but Cinder responds with the classic, "Who?" and the fight begins. And this fight is awful. Like, RWBY fights are generally action-packed and have great choreography. They should be studied for how dynamic and stylized they are. But here it could be far from that. It's slow, very uneventful, and people stand around not doing much. You know, like a real fight. Eventually, Cinder and Jean rush at each other, which causes RWBY to have Beacon flashbacks. RWBY readies her special genetic trait, but Emerald knocks her out before RWBY can do major damage. Cinder then proceeds to impale Weiss with her spear. Pause, but Jean unlocks his semblance Aura Amp. This heals Weiss, who jumps back into the action. Hazel eventually learns about Oscar's little secret and proceeds to fight him thinking he's Oz. Hazel basically explains that Ozpin killed his sister by allowing her into Beacon. With the chaos of the fight rising, Cinder decides that now is the time to escape to the vault with Raven and Renal. Down in the vault, Renal attempts to open the damn thing, but Cinder kills her as she tries. Cinder wants to add the Spring Maiden's power to her skill set, but it's only here where it's revealed that Renal wasn't the maiden, but Raven was. A battle then ensues with Cinder and Raven because of the blatant backstab. But back on the surface, Adam is finally ready to start his revolution by blowing up Haven with some planted bombs. However, Blake's son and Ilya arrive along with her army of Faunus and non-racist Mistral police force. Blake also explains that the bombs that Adam planted have all been disarmed thanks to Ilya. With the White Fang surrounded, Adam makes one final charge at Blake, but as a sign of her growth and new resolve, Blake manages to disarm and defeat Adam. With Adam thoroughly defeated, Blake tells him to go home. and Adam leaves in a tantrum. Before Blake joins the internal fray, RWBY regains consciousness and tells Yang to go after Raven in the vault. And when Blake does join in the fight, Lionheart cowardly flees from the fight and proceeds to die to Salem off screen. Raven defeats Cinder and sends her to the vault's seemingly bottomless pit encased in ice, making this Cinder's second death scene in RWBY. Let's see if we can get a third. Before Raven opens the vault, Yang manages to reach her mom and call her out for being the biggest coward of them all. Yang's logic being that she doesn't have the courage to stand against Salem, making her a coward, I guess? Anywho, this somehow reaches Raven, who opens the vault for Yang before flying off. Yang returns with the Relic of Knowledge, and Emerald realizes that this could only mean one thing. Using her semblance, Emerald manages to escape with Mercury and Hazel. And finally, after 2 long volumes, Team RWBY reunites in a 4-person hug. Aww. Blake's dad reassumes the title of the head of the White Fang, and Ozpin tells Crow that their next goal is to bring the lamp to Atlas. As the credits finish, it's revealed that Raven returned to Patch, or more specifically, to Tai Yang. Volume 5 is arguably the worst volume of RWBY. The action choreography sucks, and the cracks that appear without Monty as head shine brightly. Also, I hope you enjoyed Blake's plotline, because this is where her story ends. She has won. Racism is mostly over, and the White Fang are no longer an issue. Spoilers, but the White Fang, or the fact that Blake is a Faunus, never come back in a meaningful way after this volume. Maybe it's for the best though. Who knows how messy the following volumes would have been if they stuck around. But speaking of volume 6, Crow does a quick recap of Volume 5 before RWBY tells Crow to get moving. This is a joke because the main criticism of Volume 5 was people standing around and doing nothing. Blake gives a goodbye to Sun and Ilya, who are both departing for distant lands. Sun is heading to Vacuo to reconnect with his team after spending 2 volumes away from them. Ilya, meanwhile, wants to atone for her sins by working with Gira to restore the reputation of the White Fang. Team Orange Crobe plan to take the train to Argus, a port city near Atlas. From there, they plan to take a plane to Atlas to deliver the Relic of Knowledge to Ironwood for safekeeping. While docking, we learn the lore behind the Relic of Knowledge. It can answer 3 questions every 100 years, but can't answer things that have yet to happen. Ozpin tells the group that the questions have already been answered, so no one can really use the relic. Anyway, while on the train, the Grimm begin to attack. Ozpin again, through Oscar, tells the team that the Grimm are probably here because of the relics. This annoys Yang almost as much as Blake's overcorrection of trying to make amends. The team decides to split up, dividing the train cars, leaving Jean, Nora, and Ren to guide the civilians to safety on the train, while Team RWBY, Oskpin, and Crow fight off the remaining Grimm. Once the team divides, the Krubby car crashes from the Grimm attack, and it's revealed that the team had a stowaway, that being an old lady with eye prosthetics. Her name is Maria. Regardless, Yang is fed up with Ozpin after not telling the full truth about the lamp. Ozpin tries to rationalize and de-escalate the situation, but Weiss and Blake, who have also been here for a total of 5 minutes, also get on Ozpin's case about the half-truths and lies. Ozpin again tries to explain that he's not trying to attract more Grimm by giving them answers that could raise their anxiety and stress. However, Yang yells at Ozpin, demanding that he trust them and open up. Oz snaps back that Lionheart wasn't the first to betray him. He's cautious with this information because he needs to be extra careful about what decides to trust. But Oscar, attempting to take control of the situation, tells the group to get answers by using the lamp, calling the lamp's owner, Jin. Ozpin tells them not to, but RWBY summons Jin. The world freezes as this non-advertiser friendly RWBY character comes from the lamp, revealing that 2 questions remain. Listen, I'm not going to show an actual image of her, because I don't need my video to be flagged for nudity. This breaks the little remaining faith the team have in Ozpin, and they demand to know the truth. So Team RWBY, Oscar, Crow, and Maria all learn of Ozpin's sad, tragic, anime backstory. Back during the Age of Magic, there was a lone woman locked in a tower by her father. This woman was gifted in magic, but incredibly lonely in her isolation. One day, a warrior named Ozma ventured to the tower to save the woman inside. The two fell in love, but shortly after, Ozma fell to a mysterious illness, leaving the woman behind. The woman sought the power of the Brothers of Old to bring her beloved back. She first sought the Brother of Light. The brother sympathizes with the woman's struggles, but refuses her aid. Typical balance shenanigans. So the woman seeks out the younger brother of darkness for aid. The younger brother answers her pleas, but after a visit from his bro, decides to go back on his word.
Oh, looks like one of these guys made it through.
Wait, what?
The brothers are disgusted by the woman's perseverance to defy the workings of balance. They in turn curse her with immortality in an attempt to understand the workings of life and death. This angers the woman. She attempts to defy the gods and rally the world's forces against them. This disappoints the brothers, and the younger one completely wipes out humanity. All save for the woman, who cannot die. The two brothers decide to abandon the world they had created and venture into space. Psst! This is why the moon was shattered. With no other options of dying, the woman jumps into a pool of darkness left behind by the younger brother. The pool doesn't kill her, but instead warps her into a human being with control over Grimm. As the world develops and mankind slowly reforms, the woman makes it her mission to kill them all and the planet. In the emptiness of nothing, Ozma wakes up in front of the brothers of old, specifically the older brother. The older brother offers Ozma a quest to unite the world together. When that happens, bring the 4 newly created relics together, and he will bring the brothers back to the world of Remnant. However, should he fail, and summon the gods before life's unification, the brothers will purge the world entirely. Ozma accepts the quest, and accepts the curse of reincarnation until he completes his quest. In a new body, Ozma witnesses the rise of the Faunus and the creation of dust on the new world of Remnant. Ozma eventually finds the distorted love he left long ago, and the two rekindle their relationship. They have 4 kids, all blessed with seasonal magic, and together they live a happy life. Psst! This is how the maidens came to be! One night, Ozma attempts to explain his mission to his wife. The woman tells Ozma to forget about the brothers, and instead focus on how they'll reform life, bending and molding the masses as they please. Seeing several red flags, Ozma prepares to take the kids and leave. However, Ozma's love catches him in the act, and decides that if she can't have it her way, then no one can have it anyway. So everyone in this family dies except Ozma and the woman. So basically all the kids. Ozma spends his reincarnations looking for answers on how to defeat his former flame. Ozma eventually finds the lamp and asks Jin if there is a way to kill his love. But unfortunately, Jin reveals that Salem cannot be killed. So to summarize this whole conflict, it's all about a woman who couldn't let go and poisoned herself. She then decided to blame the world for her problems and is leading a force to kill the world.
Women.
Anyway, this backstory should paint a clear view of Ozpin. He's a tragic character who has spent lifetimes trying to end a conflict, only to be betrayed at nearly every turn. Scared that if anyone were to find out the truth, they'd abandon him, or worse, turn against him. Ozpin is a tragic hero with immense trust issues and PTSD. But despite learning all of this, everyone, including Crow and Oscar, turn against Ozpin for keeping this huge secret. Listen, I'm not trying to downplay the hurt that these people are experiencing. I mean, they just learned that all their efforts up until now were basically worth nothing. But the extent they go through is a bit extreme, yelling at Ozpin and Crow even punching the shit out of Oscar. So when Ozpin leaves Oscar's consciousness, it's no surprise when Oscar says he can't find him in his head. Maria tells the group to get it together, with the group's morale at an all-time low. Everyone makes their way to a settlement in the woods. We then come back to Salem. And we return to the team investigating the settlement. Weiss and Crow uncover corpses lying in bed. Blake tries to make amends with Yang, but Yang ain't feeling it. And Crow indulges in the bar to Ruby's dismay. Night passes and the team are extra grouchy in the morning. All except Maria and Ruby. Ruby drops a lamp in the well in town and instantly realizes, oh crap, I dropped the relic. So Team Ruby delves into the well, while Crow proceeds to get drunk at the bar. The team manage to find the lamp, but come across the Apathy Grimm. The Grimm are invulnerable and drain the fight of anyone in the vicinity. Basically, if Depression was a person who was also a cannibal. One of them attempt to grab Blake, and Ruby activates her silver secret, pushing him back. The group reach the end of the well, where Weiss finds a door to the bar in town. They try to go through it, but Weiss shockingly states that it's locked. You know, it's times like these that remind me of a certain passage in Harry Potter. Let me see if I can find the line. Oh, here we go. Devil snare, what did Professor Sprout say? It likes dark and damp, so light a fire! Harry choked. Yes, of course, but there's no wood, Hermione cried, wringing her hands. Have you gone mad? Ron bellowed. Are you a witch or not? I'm willing to accept a lot, but this ain't it, Chief. You're a huntress. Act like one. Anyways, the team are about to die thanks to the locked door until Maria arrives. She notices Ruby's silver eyes and is able to help her create a silver Kamiyamama to defeat the Apathy Grim, buying them enough time to escape. As the group prepare to leave town, Weiss throws a bottle of liquor down the well and lights it on fire.
Shut up, you stupid bitch!
While the team are riding off into the sunset, Maria reads from a book about how the town had kept the apathy under them, causing them to create their own downfall. How she managed to decipher this is unknown, because we get a close-up of the passage she's reading, and with the exception of "I'm tired," the rest of the text is something out of lorem ipsum. That aside, Maria reveals that she also has silver eyes, and we get a brief backstory of the old lady. In her glory days as the Grim Reaper, see what they did there, she made it her mission to rid the world of Grim with her silver eyes. However, during one mission, she's attacked by a crocodile Peter Pan inspired faunus who managed to slice her eyes. Maria won, but had to get new eye prosthetics from Atlas to recover her sight. Fun fact, Crow modeled his weapon after hers, and Ruby based Crescent Rose after Crow's weapon, so both her and Crow's weapon are based off of Maria's weapon. The gang finally make it to Argus and reunite with Jean, Ren, and Nora at Jean's sister's place. While here, Maria promises to help Ruby master her sixth sense for defeating Grim. Team RWBY heads over to the port to try and rent an airship to Atlas, but is stopped by this little gremlin named General Cordovan. Cordovan is part of the Atlas military and is in charge of border control. Cordovan doesn't allow Team RWBY rightful passage because of their faunus companion. They don't allow Junior because of Nora, and they don't allow Maria because she got into a fight with them about cashews. However, because of the reputation of the Schnee Dust Company, Cordovan offers to take Weiss home instead. Weiss is concerned about this, but RWBY guarantees that Weiss won't have to do this alone. This scene should be nice as it plays into RWBY and Weiss's friendship that's been steadily growing throughout the volumes, but it reads more like a shipping moment between Ice Flower, which makes it all the more confusing. Anyway, Crow goes drinking again while Jean, Ren, and Nora are filled in on the lore they got from Jin. Jean bullies Oscar because of Ozpin, but unlike when Team RWBY did it, his reaction makes more sense. I mean, Jean's team lost Pyrrha because of Ozpin, so this news would make him upset over her loss. Not only that, but Pyrrha trusted Oz, and it feels like a betrayal from her end. Now with some free time, if you could call it that, we get that promised training scene between Maria and RWBY. Maria explains that Salem is obviously hunting down the Silver-Eyed Warriors because they are the greatest weapons against the Grim. In order to activate the eyes, one must have the desire to protect life. When this desire is strong enough, boom! Magic Grim slaying powers. However, this can only happen in the presence of Grim, so any test can only be done through a trial of fire. And after learning this, we learn that Oscar has run away. Oh no! So the team split up to search for Oscar, and Jean gets visited by a Pyrrha-colored woman in front of a Pyrrha-shaped statue. This sparks a fire in Jean that revitalizes him to be a better leader. Oh, and Oscar didn't leave, he just got new clothes. Anyway, Jean proposes a plan to steal an airship, and Crow rightfully calls this plan out for being stupid. But RWBY stands up for Jean and tells Crow that if he doesn't quit the liquor, he doesn't get an opinion. So, the plan is for Weiss to sneak Maria on an airship through her luggage. Once she does that, Blake will disable the communications tower of Argus. Weiss will then circle the ship around, pick up the team, and pilot the ship to Atlas. This all works until Blake misses her timing and Cordovan picks up on the plan. Crow blames himself for his semblance, but RWBY tells him to shut up as Cordovan has overreacted and decided to use a giant robot to destroy Weiss's ship. RWBY decides to fight Cordovan and furthers her Naruto references by delivering some Talk no Jutsu in the process. But her words fail to reach Cordovan, and RWBY disarms the robot by blowing up the dust chambers in one of the arms. The team is about to celebrate when suddenly a giant Leviathan Grim shows up. But before we can address this, we need to explain how the plan failed in the first place. See, the reason why Blake missed her timing was because Adam went from radical terrorist to crazy ex. Adam fights Blake and proceeds to blame her for everything going wrong. Adam reveals that the stem of his hatred in humans came when he was owned by the Schnee Dust Company. He then breaks Gamble Shroud, and before he can attack Blake, Yang steps in to protect her. Yang and Adam have a proper rematch where Yang defeats Adam, and together, she and Blake kill Adam. I'd make a joke here, but the death was so bad that it actually hurts. But back to the RWBY conflict, RWBY decides that now is the time to do her trial by fire. However, when the Leviathan gets closer, RWBY uses the lamp to stop time and give her enough time to reawaken her Sharingan. Jin tells her that this is her only warning and she'll allow it this time, but she can't use this to try and cheat death again. RWBY readies herself, and thanks to a mental image of her mom, RWBY uses her Pearly Peeps against the Grimm. It does a lot of damage, but Cordovan has to come in to deal the final blow. With the mech down, Cordovan says that there's no possible way for her to stop RWBY now, you know, in that fake tsundere kind of moment. So the team gets away on their airship, where Crow finally decides to give up on drinking, and Bumblebee gets confirmed as canon, finally killing Black Sun. Now, astute RWBY watchers may note that I didn't cover something really important, so let's take a step back and cover this really small chapter in Volume 6. Oh, it's nothing too major. In fact, I'd argue it's not that important at all. You see, Cinder survives. That's right. After surviving the Gum Gum Silver Bullet and being frozen by Raven, and also being sent down to the Haven Academy vault, which, by the way, appeared to be bottomless, Cinder survived. Honestly, by this point she has more plot armor than Ephraim. Cinder murks a woman for her garb and heads into the nearest town to send assassins after Team Orange Crobe. But during this time, Neo appears wanting to kill Cinder for killing Roman. Cinder intimidates Neo with her maiden powers before manipulating her into joining her to kill off the Little Red. While this is going on, Emerald and Mercury talk about Cinder, where Emerald proceeds to blow up at him for not giving the answers that she wants to hear. Tyrion gets a refined tale to compensate for the old one being lost to Crow, and he and Watts are sent to Atlas to cause mayhem. As the volume comes to an end, Salem begins experimenting with the Grimm she can produce, while Cinder and Neo steal an airship to Atlas. Honestly, this volume isn't that great. I already covered my thoughts on Oz before, apologies, but Cinder coming back is such an asshole. I hate it. Not only that, but Jean's plan is really dumb, and RWBY doesn't make it any better. Ironwood is pretty on edge about security in Atlas, and showing up in a stolen vehicle is probably the worst decision they can make. But RWBY's excuse that Cordovan left them no choice is blatantly wrong. Weiss has an option of returning to Atlas. I know RWBY doesn't want to send her home, but we've seen that someone can hide in her and stow away in her bags. What's stopping someone from traveling with her? There's always another way. They just jumped at the first opportunity they could get. I don't know, man. I don't like it. It's just so frustrating. And I know some of them are still kids who can make some terrible decisions, but this is more than awful. Anyway, let's move on to the next volume. Oh, and what about Adam? The gang travels into Atlas and are immediately railroaded when the Atlas fleet questions the stolen airship entering their space. The gang land in Mantle instead, and Maria introduces the team to an older man named Pietro, the guy who gave Maria her eyes back. I talk more about this if Team RWBY weren't immediately getting into trouble. Grimm attack Mantle, and the group do their best to take out the Grimm. Penny arrives to aid the group and is revealed to be alive. I'd care more about this if the team cared about Penny being back, and if the opening didn't spoil this. I'm not asking for a lot, just an acknowledgement that Penny, the robot girl who died in Volume 3, came back to life. Whatever. Regardless, Penny explains that her father Pietro rebuilt her. All good as new. This is cool, but RWBY and co are captured by a group of huntsmen called the Aesops. While being transported to Atlas, we learn of a new character named Robin Hill. She is supposedly a huntress from Atlas fighting to free Mantle from the injustices that surround it. She wants to take a seat in the Atlas Council to help in her efforts, but that's about as much as we get from our generic criminal. As we get to Atlas, we finally get to talk to Ironwood, who has filled Penny, the Aesops, and Winter in on the Salem info. You know, minus the info the team knows about regarding Oz's connection and Salem's immortality. Ironwood tells the group about his plan to rebuild the tournament grounds from Volume 3 and repurpose it as a communications tower. That way, all of Remnant can be reconnected again. Ironwood also reveals his plan to reveal Salem to the public. He wants to do it with Atlas first before communicating it nationwide. That way, everyone knows they can handle the panic in a test run and act as a guiding force to protect the world from Grimm. After explaining all of this, Ironwood then asks RWBY about anything that may have happened while they were traveling to Atlas. Any information about Oz or the lamp, or anything that may be important. Now, before I discuss this next point, let me address something really quick. Ironwood, while a bit misguided, has been nothing but helpful and trustworthy. He has given Yang a new arm when she lost her old one. Free of charge, mind you. He has stood up for Weiss on multiple occasions, even offering her a home at Atlas after the calamity of Beacon. My man, Ironwood, was on the front lines, protecting civilians with his life during the fall of Beacon, and hell man, the guy just filled everyone in on his secret project for restoring the communication between the continents of Remnant. This man has done nothing but act to help everyone he gets involved with, and does so knowing the public will hate him for it. The reason I bring this all up is because instead of telling Ironwood the truth about how they bullied Ozpin into silence, how Salem is unkillable, or Ozpin's mission of uniting the world, RWBY lies to Ironwood, telling him that Ozpin just disappeared. The lamp doesn't have any questions available, and actively avoids telling him anything about Salem. What was it that Yang said?
No more lies. No more half-truths.
Ah, right. Okay, thank you. So as a sign of trust between Ironwood and the group, Ironwood lets RWBY hold on to the lamp for now. But that's not all he does. He offers the team a place to stay at Atlas during their downtime, a training room where they can get stronger with other students, new clothes and outfits, along with weapon repairs, dust refills, and new rounds, and their gosh darn huntsman license so they can act as official huntsmen and huntresses. Man, what a good, trustworthy guy. It's a shame that all his good acts don't seem to buy RWBY's trust. Nah, but we gotta focus on the shipping between Crow and this new guy Clover for something tragic the show wants to do later. After a mini montage of fun huntsman stuff, we get scenes of RWBY questioning her decisions, Jacques proclaiming to run against Robin in a Trump reference, and foreshadowing that RWBY's semblance isn't a speed quirk. Or just a speed quirk. Anyway, Watts and Tyrion successfully infiltrate Mantle and begin their plan of attack. Watts begins talking with Jacques to get rid of his Ironwood problem, while Tyrion runs amok in Mantle. Meanwhile, we finally get introduced to Jacques' opponent, Robin. Robin's methods of protest for Mantle include setting up barricades, halting the progress of Amity, and attempting to steal supplies to hand out at Mantle. While she has the right to enact protest, she does not have the right to engage in criminal activity and is stopped by Penny. Weiss tells Winter about her doubts of Ironwood, to which Winter reveals a huge secret to Weiss. Winter reveals the location of the current Winter Maiden, and explains that Ironwood plans to make her the next Winter Maiden. Weiss argues, saying Winter didn't choose this, but Winter explains that it was her decision to accept this path. Winter holds pride that Ironwood considers her for this opportunity. And then we break this tension to reveal that Jacques is being comically evil again by shutting down dust shops until he's elected. Ironwood is annoyed that Robin keeps interfering with the Amity project, to which Nora tells Ironwood that, maybe Robin wouldn't interfere if he was more open about the project. By the way, this is not a good idea, mostly because letting more people in creates more room for leaks to get out. And because we know Robin is willing to go to drastic measures to get information, who's to say how she'll react upon learning the truth? Again, I apologize to the RWBY fans if this is coming off very inaccurately. I simplified a lot of these bullet points as I was going through the volumes, so if there are any inaccuracies, put them in the comments below so others can know. Anyway, Team Broke Orange gets the night off and decide to split up and relax. Yang, Blake, and Team Funky are heading out to a club to dance. Weiss, Jean, and Oscar decide to stay home and watch a movie, and RWBY, Ren, Nora, and Penny are all going to Robin's victory party, even though the results are unannounced. As we follow RWBY's party, we have Nora and Ren caring more about the plot than the actual protagonists, as they argue about how to best handle Salem and the problems in Atlas. Nora even goes as far to say that Robin is doing more for the kingdom than Ironwood, which, is kind of a bold statement to make. Again, I'm not going to argue what Robin is doing for Mantle, but Ironwood is trying to play the long game and keep those within his arms protected. That's part of the reason he's building Amity. Fuck, gotta stop getting off track. Anyway, this leads to Nora and Ren to not see eye to eye during the victory party. Nora tries to get Ren to open up to her by kissing him, but I don't remember how well this actually works. Ruby and Penny offer protection during the event, with an Aesop's member named Marrow. Now, Marrow calls out Robin's actions for acting outside the law, and surprisingly, Robin doesn't contest him. Or if she does, the points that she brings up don't stand against the points Marrow brings up. While the party is going on, Watts and Tyrion decide to strike. Watts slowly rigs the votes towards Jock's favor while also creating a blackout at Robin's event, letting Tyrion go to town attacking people. Now I don't remember exactly where I heard this, but again, most Faunists have the trait to see in the dark. This is why Tyrion can cause so much damage despite the lack of sight. However, for some reason, Marrow, or this goat girl, a member of Robin's Happy Huntresses, don't see Tyrion in the dark. I was willing to give it a pass because some animals don't have night vision, but then I did a little research. How can Tyrion see in the dark, but not Marrow? Wolves or dogs have some form of night vision, but scorpions don't. I guess the reason for this is because they needed to frame someone for the killing, and rather than use the Aesops or one of the Happy Huntresses, they needed to put more pressure on Ironwood by having Penny be framed. Marrow uses his doggy semblance to buy Ruby and friends time to get away from the masses, and upon leaving, Penny is held under lockdown while Robin does his best to take control of the situation. Ironwood tries to have Mantle and Atlas citizens stay in the safety of their homes while he has his operatives find the true culprit. But during this time, Robin begins stealing whole-ass Atlas supply trucks to aid the people of Mantle. And any reason for me to support Robin in this scenario goes completely out the window. Winter proposes to enact martial law to finish the Amity project by circumventing the council and Robin. Ironwood struggles as he weighs this option, but Nora calls Ironwood out, telling him he hasn't suffered like the people of Mantle. She argues that the best option moving forward is to get the news out about Amity and Salem. However, Ironwood rightfully argues that doing this would attract more Grimm and risk Amity's safety. If he were to go through with this, then more people would suffer from his actions. Ironwood decides that with Robin's current actions, she is to be placed under arrest. If she decides to cooperate with the authorities, only then will she be released. This action puts a divide between Ren and Nora, as Ren follows Ironwood's orders and Nora is against Ironwood. With Penny in containment, Pietro expresses his grievances if he were to lose Penny again. See, fun little Penny lore. Penny is the first of her kind, an artificial life form capable of maintaining an aura. But the reason for this is because Pietro embedded part of his aura into Penny during her development, giving life to his wooden doll. However, with how little aura Pietro has remaining, if Penny were to die again, Pietro couldn't rebuild her. This will come back later when you least expect it. Blake and Yang corner Robin during her escapades and manage to convince Robin to just talk. We learn that Robin's semblance is truly awful, as it's just a lie detector. Yang and Blake end up spilling some of the tea regarding the Amity project to Robin. The two make Robin promise not to tell anyone, and Robin is let go by the duo. While this is happening, Ironwood guides Oscar to the Atlas Vault to help reawaken Ozpin by explaining the Staff of Creation. Ironwood explains the Staff of Creation is the sole reason why Atlas flies and doesn't crash into Mantle. The staff can create anything, but can only focus on one project at a time. So they can't use the staff on the Amity project without risking the safety of everyone in Mantle. Oscar delivers some sound advice to the general about letting fear control you, and Ironwood positively remarks about how Oscar reminds him of Oz. We now cut to Jock's first decision as councilman, and that is a dinner party at the Schnee Manor, with Ironwood defending his seat on the council. The team plan to buy Weiss an opening to investigate her father's chambers to search for incriminating evidence about Jock and his suspicious win against Robin. Weiss learns from Whitley that Klein was let go because he aided in Weiss's departure. Meanwhile, to add salt to the wound, Jock reveals that he also invited Robin to the dinner party to help antagonize Ironwood and his robot. Winter falls into Jock's trap by telling the group that they need to trust Ironwood. However, Jock counters that Ironwood has yet to prove that he can be trusted. After this, we get a moment with Penny and Winter where Penny expresses her confusion about the problems of speaking from the heart. Weiss finally enters her father's chambers only to find her mother Willow drinking in there. Willow gives Weiss the evidence she needs to convict Jock in front of the council. However, before Weiss leaves, Willow reminds her not to forget about Whitley. Where Winter could escape into Atlas Academy and she could escape to Beacon, Whitley had nowhere to go and was left alone with his father, basically pushing the idea that if you believe Weiss got abused by her father, then Whitley has more damage from him than anyone else. Oh, and Watts shits off the Heaton mantle. Fun little side note. But we don't care about that because Ironwood is getting grilled by his fellow councilmen. Ironwood tries to explain that he's doing his best to prevent another Beacon situation, but Robin calls him out for keeping secrets. But this doesn't matter as Weiss blows the lid on Jock, revealing his connections to Watts. Robin questions how Tyrion and Watts play into the game, along with how they plan to impact Amity, but Ironwood responds with, "How the fuck do you know about Amity?" Oscar manages to convince Ironwood to reveal the truth to the public about Amity thanks to Robin. Ironwood tells the public that Amity is finished and that he plans to begin the next phase of his plan very soon. Ruby decides that now is the time to tell Ironwood the full truth and leaves this responsibility to Oscar. This is mostly because Team Ruby, the remnants of Juniper, and the Aesops are busy with Grimm along with finding Tyrion and Watts. Tyrion and Watts split up, with Watts going out to stop the Amity project and Tyrion causing general havoc as he searches for Robin. Cinder, yeah, bet you forgot she was still here, orders Neo, yeah, bet you forgot she was with her, to obtain the lamp from Oscar while she plans an epic prank. Tyrion manages to find Robin, but is ambushed by Crow and Clover, who manage to detain the psychopath. Watts, meanwhile, arrives at Amity only to find it incomplete. Ironwood reveals that he lied about it being finished, and the two of them get into a well-fought scuffle to the song Hero. I haven't brought up the backtracks for a while, but this one is important. Hero is a track from the perspective of Ironwood, as it delves into his mindset that he carries throughout the volume. It goes into his insecurities about being heartless and how the society will hate him for his actions. But despite this, he continues to protect everyone at all costs, to be a hero that will continue to fight for everyone's future. While I haven't heard the track itself, as of writing this, the lyrics do their best to recap the emotions and character that is General James Ironwood. I salute you, you goddamn hero. Anyway, Ironwood gets bodied by Watts, and Watts prepares to leave Ironwood by himself, but Ironwood proves why he's everyone's hero and destroys his arm in order to stop Watts, and throw him into custody. After locking up Watts, Ironwood returns to his quarter only to be paralyzed, as on his desk is the sole reminder of his failure at Beacon. While Clover, Crow, and Robin are returning with Tyrion in custody, Team Ruby and the remaining Aesops report to Ironwood. Ironwood learns of Team Ruby's betrayal with Robin, and begins to question their loyalty. But before we can get into Team Ruby's response, the room gets a message from Salem herself with the help of some projection thing or whatever. Salem pulls a King's Ramses and tells Ironwood to give her the relic or face her wrath. Ruby proceeds to call out Salem, but Salem traumatizes Ruby by implying that she killed her mom.
Emotional damage!
Salem's image leaves, and after a brief silence, Ironwood tells Team Ruby that he has sent Winter to claim the Winter Maiden's powers, and plans to lock away the staff and the lamp in the Atlas Vault forever. Ruby questions Ironwood about this, but Ironwood flat out says that things could have been fine if Team Ruby still had his trust, if they didn't constantly disregard his actions and treat him like a bad guy for just trying to help. Bro is going down his Joker arc. And now, with Salem at their doorsteps, Ironwood plans to use the staff to save the people of Atlas by raising them into the sky outside of Salem's influence, prioritizing the safety of the people and those he can save, along with the relics and the Maiden. Ruby argues against this plan, as it leaves all the people of Mantle to die. Ruby wonders if they can save everyone by contacting the Outer Nations for help using Amity, or buying time to fight off Salem. However, the Aesops side with Ironwood, following the logic of winning the war rather than winning the fight. With both sides divided and neither willing to budge, Ironwood puts Team Ruby and all their assailants under arrest. RWBY contacts everyone, warning them that Ironwood is enacting martial law, but midway through, Ironwood cuts off the connection. From here, we get a series of fights that I'll dive into one by one. Starting with Jean, Ren, and Nora, they return to Atlas only to find Oscar missing. Neo manages to steal the lamp and disguises Oscar as she tries to hide among Junior, but the real Oscar manages to run in and separate Neo from the group. Neo unfortunately gets away with the lamp, and while Junior chases after Neo, Oscar goes off to find Ironwood. Next, Clover tells Crow that he's been put under arrest. Now, Crow is on good terms with Clover, so he tries to rationalize everything that's going on. But Robin tells Crow that the two of them could easily take on Clover, adding fuel to the fire. With this chaos starting to brew, Tyrion manages to kill the pilot, causing the plane to crash. Our 4 players manage to survive the crash, and Clover tells Crow to surrender so that way they can aid Robin and focus their efforts on capturing Tyrion. However, because of his semblance of the writers wanting Crow to make a stupid decision, Crow decides to trust the literal serial killer part of the conversation over Clover. Tyrion and Crow fight against Clover, and Tyrion unsurprisingly backstabs Crow, killing Clover with Crow's weapon and framing him for Clover's death. Atlas authorities arrive soon after to detain Crow and Robin. Team RWBY, meanwhile, face off against the 4 Aesops. Now, the Aesops are described as the best of the best in Atlas. They are elite huntsmen who more or less serve as Ironwood's personal guard, and Team RWBY beats their asses. Any loss Team RWBY faces after this just shows that they weren't trying hard enough. And finally, we join back with Winter and Penny. Penny tries to explain that Ironwood's plan is flawed, but Winter reminds Penny that they must prioritize the lives of the many over the lives of the few. This annoys Penny, but the two make their way to the Maiden's chamber only to be stopped by Cinder. These 3 get into a fight, which brings them into the room with the Maiden. The Maiden starts a snowstorm that keeps Cinder and Winter away because of the harsh cold. Penny manages to calm the Maiden down, and the Maiden passes her power onto her, making Penny the first male Maiden. Now, you may be confused why I just called Penny a male maiden when I've been actively referring to Penny as a woman. Well, there's a simple reason for that. And yes, I have mentioned this before. See, let's not pretend that Penny is a person for a brief moment. Yes, she is a living robot with a soul, but let's not forget that at the end of the day, she is a robot. Penny's soul, or aura, doesn't belong to her. It belongs to her father, the person who created her. The Maiden powers transferred over to Penny despite having her father's aura, meaning the powers were able to transfer into a soul of someone masculine. Because at the end of the day, Penny is a robot with a man's soul. I hope this makes sense, and I apologize if this came out of nowhere or if it offends anybody. But after thinking about it, this should not make sense with how the Maiden powers work. Anyway, Team RWBY arrive. RWBY unleashes Jajonkin Silver and wipes out Cinder yet again, and her appearance being brought back into question yet again. What is that, 3? Do I hear 4? Regardless, with Winter being heavily injured, she tells Penny and Co to escape as she calls for backup. Oscar meets Ironwood in the vault and tries to reason with James before he goes off the deep end. But Ironwood, sick of having people trying to stop him in pursuit of aid, shoots Oscar down into the Atlas vault. This would have more tension if we didn't already see the vaults have a bottom, and Ozpin finally comes back to save himself from dying too soon. As Team RWBY and Juniper escape, they witness a truly baffling sight, as Salem arrives in Atlas riding a whale. Honestly, I could not keep myself from pulling punches. They went from bullying Ozpin for lying and keeping secrets and not telling the truth, to bullying Ironwood for being a good person. Like, Ironwood hasn't done anything wrong to them, and they still decide not to trust him. Oh, and RWBY is such a hypocrite that she deserves the ending she got. Why are you allowed to do things that you criticize others for and expect to get away with it? The only good thing was the animation, because this and last season really made up for how bad 4 and 5 were. Oh, and unironically Ironwood. Ironwood had such a great descent into the antagonist role that it almost feels like a mistake compared to everything else going on. Seriously, with how well Ironwood had been set up, it only made sense that the cold soldier of steel fell to his paranoia. It makes me so excited to see how he'll be carried into Volume 8. I really hope I don't regret these words in the next 5 minutes, because it's time to move into... So Cinder survives, shocker, and presents the lamp to Salem like she got it for her. And Neo is having none of that shit. Mercury, Emerald, and Hazel show up with redesigns, and Emerald is thankful that Cinder is alive, but Cinder tells her to shut the fuck up. Cinder insists that she goes off to kill Ruby or steal Penny's powers, but Salem tells her to sit down before she accidentally doesn't kill herself again. Cutting back to Team RWBY, they save Oscar and begin doing their best to save the people of Mantle. However, the task seems too big for their heads, and the group seem to be at each other's throats. Yang calls out RWBY for being a bad leader, Penny is having an identity crisis as she struggles between her new title of Maiden and Ironwood's savior of the people. This all leads to the team dividing and conquering multiple objectives. RWBY, along with Weiss, Blake, Nora, and Penny, decide to infiltrate back into Atlas to launch Amity and warn all of Remnant of Salem. Meanwhile, Yang, accompanied by Jean, Ren, and Oscar, continue their job of saving the people of Mantle. Also, to prove that Ironwood is truly a bad guy, he shoots one of the councilmen without warning. We'll cover these events one by one, starting with Team Brown P. So, before they begin their infiltration, Penny receives a call from Ironwood telling her to reconsider her choices and return to Atlas. RWBY promptly tells Ironwood to fuck off as they don't negotiate with world leaders. Ironwood tells RWBY that countless people's lives will be on her hands before hanging up. Penny wonders if this is the correct choice, but the team tells her to shut up and go with it. Cutting back to Crow in prison, Robin proceeds to blame Jacques for all their problems. However, Crow says that the first thing he's going to do after leaving is killing Ironwood. Team Brown P get help from one of Robin's happy huntresses, named May Marigold. According to the wiki, they're supposed to be a reference to Maid Marian, but I don't see it. Anyway, by using the Schnee mail system that totally exists, the team enters Atlas. RWBY also uses this time to reaffirm to Penny that Ironwood is the bad guy in all of this, and that Ironwood is nothing but a filthy liar who's trying to gaslight Penny into rejoining his side. While shifting through the halls of private Atlas records, Penny fills in the group, including RWBY, about the full effects of RWBY's semblance. I hate this, but this is going to be very important to the plot later on. See, how RWBY's semblance works is that she can break herself down to a molecular level, allowing her to travel anywhere by negating the mass of herself and anyone she carries with her when using her semblance. Cutting to Ironwood, he desperately wants to get Penny back to his side. So, doing the only thing that makes rational sense, he proceeds to get Watts to hack into Penny and return her to him. Back to Brown PM, they successfully hack into Atlas to jumpstart Amity thanks to Pietro. During this time, Nora starts discussing her troubles with her relationship with Ren. Now, I'll be honest, I thought that it was Ren who needed to develop for Nora, because Ren has been very distant from Nora last season, and it felt like Nora was doing a lot of the heavy lifting. But apparently, I might have been wrong. See, Blake accurately deduces that Nora doesn't understand what she brings to the table when it comes to their relationship. I guess I was just stupid for thinking that Ren needed something. Anyway, the team finish up and are about to leave before getting ambushed by the Aesops. Weiss mocks them, saying that Team Brown Pim will just kick their ass a second time. However, Marrow tells them that the only reason they won before was because they were holding back. And after saying this, they separate Nora, Penny, and May with a fortified door to fight against RWBY, Blake, and Weiss. Nora decides that she isn't just be strong and hit stuff, and uses her semblance to break the door down. However, because the electrical current she absorbed was different from normal electric currents, Nora ends up scarring herself in the process. Team Brown Pim escape, but not before the Aesops steal one of Penny's swords. As Brown Pim make their way to Schnee Manor to rest, Crow and Robin bond over their lack of meaningful connections. Alright, time to shift into story 2. While Team Jory are out protecting people, Salem decides to create a new Grim to hunt down Oz. While guiding people to safety, Oz and Oscar have a mental conversation about their souls merging. Oscar saying that he doesn't want this, but Oz saying that it's inevitable. Meanwhile, Jean is helping by amplifying Aura's Ren by amplifying Aura's Ren to guide people en masse. Jean continually encouraging Ren, but Ren tells Jean to shut up so he can focus. Team Jory gets attacked by Grim, and rather than use the cane to fight back, Oscar proceeds to get continually beat up by the Grim. The team try to aid Oscar, but notice that the Grimm that's got him is acting really strange. First off, it's speaking. Second, it's using Oscar as a shield. Now there are 3 of them, so maybe if they planned this out they could save Oscar, but then the Grimm in question begins transforming. Now they should allow the team to save Oscar, since it's transforming at a slow pace. But like true anime protagonists, they can't just rush a guy while they're transforming. That's rude. Growing wings, Oscar is taken by the Grimm, and John, Ren, and Yang fail to save Oscar. While returning back to Mantle, Yang and Ren get into a fight, and this basically feels like the writers calling out that the characters fucked up. Basically, Yang argues that all things considered, the team did their best given the circumstances they've been faced with, citing the Leviathan and Haven as their best wins. However, Ren argues that ever since they got into Atlas, they have been making the worst decisions, citing how they lost Oscar and the lamp, as well as causing more innocent lives to suffer by not turning over the maiden to Ironwood. While I was on Ren's side for a good part of the argument, he randomly attacks John for cheating his way into Beacon. This hasn't been relevant since like volume 2, and feels like a low blow for something that shouldn't even matter by now, especially since John has proven himself to be more than qualified as a huntsman. After this, Yang calls out Ren for being a dickhead and starts feeding into his insecurities about flower power, as she and John seek out shelter. Alright, back to Salem. Salem begins trying to extract information out of Oscar, and because Oscar hasn't suffered enough, he has this information tortured out of him to no avail. After her torture doesn't work, Salem leaves Hazel to do her job, as she goes out to babysit Cinder. See, Cinder is getting impatient and believes that she can still be of use in the destruction of Atlas, but Salem tells her that she's grounded to the whale until further notice. Cinder, going through her rebellious phase, takes Neo and Emerald for a prank she wants to pull later. As we get to the end of this part, Yang talks to Jean and wonders if she'll forgive her for working on Mantle rather than aiding in the infiltration. Jean assumes that Yang is talking about RWBY and says that, they're sisters, of course RWBY will forgive her. But in actuality, Yang implies that she was talking about Blake. Why Blake? I have no idea. Alright, so before we get into the second round of Brown Pam and Jory info, there is one event that happens that occurs that we need to discuss. Penny leaves her team to finish the Amity mission with her father and Maria. However, during this, Cinder decides to get revenge on Penny, while Neo takes care of Pietro and Maria. Cinder takes another L with her life being brought back into question.
Do I hear fine?
Emerald manages to save Cinder and tells Neo to retreat before they suffer worse casualties. Amity took some damage during the attack, so Penny flies down to keep Amity afloat, while Ruby's message broadcasts all over Remnant, a message to get help and reveal Salem to the public. However, Watts finally manages to hack into Penny thanks to her sword that the Aesops took. Penny falls into Atlas in a burning comet, leaving Pietro to believe that his daughter died again. By the way, this is the last appearance of Maria and Pietro as of present. We will assume that they died here until further notice. We finally get Cinder's sad anime backstory, and this one is pretty bad. See, all the characters have had some semblance to the fairy tale or story about them. Ren is gender-bent Mulan, Hazel is Hansel and Gretel, and of course, Cinder is based off Cinderella. But rather than give her an appropriate backstory that builds towards her joining Salem, we instead get the most Cinderella stories of all Cinderella stories. With richer lyrics as, clean the linens, sweep the floors, shut your mouth and do your chores, scrub the dishes in the sink. No one told you, you should think. Shine the silver, wash the clothes, and when you're finished, darn the socks, draw my bath, fetch the slippers, fill my glass, and rub my feet. Hurry up, you're so slow, you're no good. I hope you know that your life is no use, and the truth is that no one ever loved you. Great subtle storytelling. The real major difference is that Cinder breaks from her chains and kills her evil captors and the person who trained her. Why would she bend the knee to Salem after breaking from a similar system? Is a great question, and we will probably never get that answer. Alright, back to Jory, or more Cinder. Cinder wakes up in the whale where Mercury picks her up for a Salem meeting. While this is going on, Ozpin tries to convince Hazel to defect from Salem. We will see if Ozpin succeeds later. Cinder is reprimanded by Salem for acting out of line. Salem then tasks Cinder to find Watts and kill the Maiden. Oscar tries to talk to the other villains but gets told to shut the fuck up. With the Grimm attacking Atlas, the shield protecting them goes out. Ironwood begins moving innocent civilians into the subways, while giving Winter the job to deploy the bomb in the whale. Ozpin tries again to convince Hazel to defect, this time with Oscar's help. We will see if he decides to defect later. Emerald overhears Ozpin and Oscar's words and tries to talk to Mercury about it. Mercury is about to tell her to forget it, but Tyrion makes them both uneasy and really consider their actions. Alright, so getting back to the other members of the team, the Aesops and Winter manage to find Yang, Ren, and John while heading to the whale. While being interrogated, Ren's semblance evolves. Now, along with masking the emotions of others, he can read the emotions of others by seeing their aura made from petals around them. Ren manages to find out the emotions of everyone and manages to convince the interrogators to let Jean, Yang, and him save Oscar. However, Winter gives them a time limit, threatening to blow up the whale if they aren't back in time. While this is going on, Crow and Robin are busted out of prison by Raven. You can tell it's Raven because a black bird flies away, breaking them free. But these two aren't the only ones to escape, because Watts also escapes thanks to Cinder's meddling. Hazel and Emerald get Oscar to summon Jin, and upon seeing her, instantly believe in Ozpin's words. As the group leave the lamp behind to focus on their escape, Neo steals the lamp. Neo was using her semblance to hide herself, and knows the password to activate the lamp. Jean, Yang, and Ren reunite with Oscar, Emerald, and Hazel near the entrance of the whale. However, because Neo stole the lamp, Salem finds the party while searching for her stolen treasure. Salem proceeds to body everybody, and while pinned to the floor, Yang calls out Salem for acting like a child before finally remembering the super mom that she mentioned back in volume 2. Hazel decides to save everyone after telling Oz to make sure events that killed her sister never occur again. Hazel buys time for most of the group to escape, minus Oscar. Oscar decides to defeat Salem and the whale himself by using Ozpin's magic combined with the kinetic energy that's been stored in Ozpin's cane for centuries, combining together for one huge hyper beam that ends up killing Salem, the whale, a majority of the Grimm attacking Atlas, and Hazel. With the active threat neutralized, Team Jory and Emerald fly off to reunite with RWBY. How is RWBY, by the way? Well, picking up where we last left off the bunch, Team Brown M arrive at the Schnee Manor where they come across Whitley at the door. Now this is the first scene of Weiss and Whitley after the events of Willow's talk. So what is the first thing Weiss does? Well, she threatens Whitley to go to his room and stay there while the team do their best to recuperate their losses. From here, Nora's left to rest while RWBY, Weiss, and Blake look over the battle that takes place with Atlas and the Grimm. Why aren't they aiding in the conflict while Team Funky is beyond me. But as the trio sip tea, we learn why May doesn't aid Atlas, because her family rejected her during a sensitive time in her life where she was transitioning to become a woman. May tells the team to pick between the lives of Atlas and Mantle, but the trio say there are no sides in the conflict. You know, except for their side, because Team RWBY are the voices of reason. Anyway, Klein finally returns, and this is because Whitley called someone with actual medical understanding to take care of Nora. This one act redeems Whitley and Weiss's eyes, and the two make up with a hug. But before we can get any more of this heartfelt drama, Penny crash lands into Schnee Manor. The team bring Penny in, and while she and Nora are recovering, Whitley proposes a plan to use the Schnee cargo ships to evacuate the people of Atlas and Mantle. Whitley was here for 10 minutes, and has already done more than our trio in the past hour. The team need to divert power back into the manor before they can enact on this plan, so RWBY and Blake head down to restore power, and for the first time since Volume 1, we actually get a moment between Blake and RWBY. And honestly, this scene feels kind of forced in, because again, these two haven't interacted in a meaningful way outside of Ladybug from Volume 2. But this moment is short-lived as the duo get attacked by Salem's experimental Grimm. But unlike Jory protecting Oscar, Blake and Weiss manage to save RWBY multiple times from this beast. The fight goes back into the Schnee Manor, where a hacked Penny is now trying to flee the vicinity to open the vault. However, the experiment sees Penny as a threat and attacks her as well. This awakens RWBY's powers, and she unleashes the Omega Silver Spirit Gun against the experimental Grimm. And to the horror of everyone, the Grim survives and reveals a head with silver eyes manipulating the Grim. However, Whitley and Willow defeat the Grim by dropping a marble statue on it. With this, we are caught up to speed on both sides, and we return to Ironwood getting Big Baby Rage mad when he learns that Winter let Team Jory go. Team Jory make their way to Schnee Manor, with Yang saying that having Emerald with them is a bad idea. Oscar tells Yang to give her a second chance, but considering this is the same person who helped cause the fall of Beacon and indirectly got Pyrrha killed, I'm on Yang's side. The two teams reconnect again, but this heartwarming encounter is stifled when civilian ships begin getting shot down by Atlas forces. Ironwood delivers one final ultimatum towards Team... I'm gonna kill myself. Who keeps making all these stupid names? Team and Brown Power Jew, the Maiden, or he's gonna nuke Mantle with the whale bomb. So with the casual character assassination of Ironwood, Marrow calls out Ironwood for jumping the gun on this one. Winter has to jump in to save his ass from suffering a swift end by putting Marrow under arrest for treason. Team and Brown Power Jew struggles to come up with a solution to the problem, and Emerald is making the situation worse by running her mouth. While this is going on, Nora chews out Ren for being distant, telling Ren that when times get tough, he shut people out, so he wouldn't have to feel the stress that comes from it, which I don't think is true. He didn't do this in volume 4 or 5. 6 comes along and he's barely there to show off his reserved nature. And volume 7 just shows Ren taking his job as a huntsman seriously as he follows Ironwood's orders and focuses on saving people from the Grim. Volume 8 is the only time where this could have been shown, and the examples that I think they're trying to use are when Ren is using his semblance where he needs to concentrate. Maybe there's something I'm missing, kind of like the burn thing from volume 4 with Yang, but needless tangent aside, Ren apologizes to Nora about being a bad teammate and partner, and their argument ends with Nora wanting to be alone for a bit as she works to find out who Nora is. Robin manages to get Crow off his kill Ironwood phase since their lives are more important than getting revenge for the homie. Yang and RWBY finally have a moment, which hasn't happened since like volume 3 I believe, where the two talk about Summer Rose and how badly the two plans went. Honestly, this conversation is fine for what it is, but it also feels weird that RWBY is getting all of this now. I'll touch on it later, but for reference, RWBY the character hasn't gotten much development compared to everyone else. Jean had his thing, Ren, Nora, Weiss, and Yang all had their things. Hell, Blake had her character story wrapped up in volume 6. But RWBY hasn't had anything since volume 1, where she had to become a better leader for her team. 7 volumes later, and only now are we getting an actual moment for RWBY, and it's to call out her naivety for thinking that the world would come to Atlas's aid. But we can't stop to analyze this moment because, uh-oh, Penny is glitching out and trying to flee for the vault. Penny begs for RWBY to kill her so she can pass the powers on to RWBY and Salem doesn't get the staff. However, RWBY doesn't kill Penny again, and with Jean's help, the two are able to keep Penny under control with Jean's semblance. After watching the battle, Emerald comes in and yells at the team, saying that if they break up now as she switches sides, she's gonna be pissed. And that's not me mincing her words, that is what she says, and it's supposed to be treated as a wholesome moment. Oh, Emerald, you funny gal. It's so funny that you're embarrassed about admitting to switching sides. Ha 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 ha. By the way, you helped aid in the fall of Beacon. Go curl yourself. We get a brief scene where Ironwood directs the Aesops to fly out the bomb and defend it against Robin and Crow before cutting back to RWBY. RWBY comes up with a plan to save the people of Mantle and Atlas while disarming Ironwood in the process. This plan involves Emerald using her semblance to sneak everyone into Atlas, after Penny delivers a message about giving up. Once there, the team dogpiles Ironwood with the help of Winter, who will then guide Team RWBY and Penny to the vaults. Osmond tells the group how the staff works, basically boiling it down to 3 rules. 1. You must be detailed on how you want something. You need to know and explain it thoroughly for something to be made. The staff will give you exactly what you desire, so the aid of blueprints and schematics could be helpful. 2. The staff cannot be used to bring someone back from the dead. Sorry, Jean, you just keep taking L's here. And finally, the staff can only be used to create one thing at a time. To make something new, something old has to be left behind. The plan works and Team RWBY and Penny make their way to the vault. Like with Jin from before, upon using the staff, Ambrosius appears as a hypersexualized man of the staff. And with their request, Team RWBY speedrun breaking the rules of the staff by requesting Ambrosius to create Penny a new body using the parts of the original Penny. The problem is that Team RWBY have no idea what to do with Penny's soul. In theory, this request shouldn't have happened, but because RWBY tells Ambrosius to get creative with it, Penny becomes a real girl, and the robot aspect is separated from her. With Penny separated, the robotics fall apart and end up getting destroyed when making their second request. Why this doesn't kill Penny is beyond me. Their next wish also ends up breaking the rules. Yang and Weiss ask the staff to create a one-way ticket from multiple points in Atlas and Mistral into Vacuo.
Seriously, how long is it gonna take for you to understand the damn rules?
And I hate this because it feels like this was only created for something cool the writers wanted to do later. They don't explain exactly where or how the portals come to be. They never explain how it transports them to Vacuo. It's just a portal to the Desert Kingdom. And why Vacuo is also beyond me, because it's like the most dangerous place for everyone to be. But pop off, I guess, whatever. With this, Ambrosius gives them an ominous warning of not falling before the gang leave with the staff. Now with Ironwood thrown in prison, the whole squad aid the transport of mass civilians to Vacuo. But before we can continue here, we need to go all the way back to see what Cinder has been doing this whole time. And it may be dumb to do this, but it's important for what comes next. After rescuing Watts and watching the whale get blown up, Cinder tells Watts to summon Penny to her so she can rip the maiden powers out of her. Watts tells her that that's not how the virus works. And after learning this, Cinder tells Watts that she's going to kill him and then charge after Penny herself. Watts laughs in Cinder's face and reminds her that over the course of the past 4 volumes, she's been nothing but a screw-up who couldn't even succeed in one of her plans after the fall of Beacon. Watts proceeds to criticize her in every regard, and like a child who'd just been scolded by their parents, Cinder starts crying. Together, the two come up with a plan after reconnecting with Neo, who gives up the lamp in exchange for shifting course to kill RWBY. Using the lamp, Cinder uses the final question to figure out what Team RWBY are up to. They learn of the plan to use the staff, and together, the three of them do their very best to interfere with the plan. Watts begins by sabotaging Atlas, freeing Ironwood, who then proceeds to kill Jacques. Cinder and Neo happen to take a portal into the space station between Atlas and Vacuo to start killing people and throwing them into the abyss. Team RWBY goes to the people's aid, and for the first time in 8 volumes, Team RWBY fights together against a central antagonist in Cinder. Cinder relearns her lesson from volume 2 and 3, which ominously cues in Neo, who's prepared to kill RWBY. However, Yang notices Neo and takes the hit for RWBY. Yang falls off the edge and vanishes into darkness. But to replace Yang, Human Penny comes in to join the fight against Cinder. Meanwhile, Winter and Ironwood fight, and 2 of the 4 Aesops fight off Crow and Robin as they try to stop the nuke above Mantle. Good news! Crow and Robin stop the bomb. Bad news, this fine guy dies to do so. Womp womp.
Did you say womp womp?
Oscar, who traveled to Vacuo, gets worried when Team RWBY doesn't arrive and tries to re-enter the portal to check on them. However, Oscar learns the hard way that when I said one-way ticket, I really meant it was a one-way ticket to Vacuo, leaving Oscar, Ren, Emerald, and eventually Nora to protect 2 whole nations worth of people from the onslaught of Grimm that sensed their presence. During the Ironwood fight, Winter joins the Team RWBY hive mind as she begins to dunk on Ironwood for the destruction that has happened over the course of the 2 volumes, instead of dunking on Team RWBY who caused all this. Cinder then proceeds to kill 2 birds with 1 stone as she kicks Neo and RWBY over the edge, sending them both into the void. Blake also gets sent over when she fails to save RWBY. This leaves Jean, Weiss, and Penny to fight off against Cinder, who has the staff and the lamp. Cinder fatally wounds Penny, and Penny forces Jean to relive his trauma of failing to save Pyrrha by killing her so she can ensure the powers don't go to Cinder. Jean kills off Penny, and I want you to guess where the Winter Maiden powers go to. Do they go to Nora, who needs all the help she can get defending the people in Vacuo? Do they go to Winter, who's battling the most crippled man on the planet? Do they go to Weiss, who needs the boost since she's currently fighting Cinder? Or do they go to John, since Penny has a male aura before becoming human? I will die on this hill. Well, if you guessed Winter, you'd be correct, because of the bond that these two share is greater than the other two options who saved her and supported her up until now. So Winter proceeds to body Ironwood and flees to the portals to get out of Atlas. Winter's too late, however, as Cinder proceeds to body Weiss and sends her to the Void. Cinder doesn't head to Vacuo and returns to Atlas, destroying the portals in the process since she's not using the staff for them anymore. Winter manages to escape to Vacuo, but Jean falls into the Void because his long jump game wasn't on point. Salem and Cinder taunt Ironwood with their victory, with Cinder even proclaiming checkmate. As Team RWBY are dead, Neo is dead, she left Watts to die in a locked room full of flames, yeah, that actually happened, and no one can reveal the truth of her actions to Salem. Atlas proceeds to crash into Mantle, destroying one of the 4 major kingdoms, and everyone is led to believe that Team RWBY and Jean are dead and must carry on without them. But wait! Because post-credit Volume 8 shows that they might have survived in a foreign land unlike their own. I'm gonna be honest, this volume, while not as bad as 5, stinks. They completely destroy Ironwood's character just so that way they could have us root for Team RWBY, and they justify their action with Ironwood's semblance. I haven't brought it up since it's so subtle that you may not have even realized that he's been using his semblance the whole time. See, Ironwood's semblance is called Metal, which just gave him super tunnel vision. It's why he was able to rip his arm out at the end of Volume 7. The amount of blatant disrespect given to Ironwood is genuinely heartbreaking. And worse, Team RWBY gets painted more like villains as the series progresses. From bullying a traumatized man, to bullying another traumatized man, to blaming all their problems on everyone else except themselves. Oh, sorry, except for that one scene where RWBY blames herself for risking their hopes on receiving aid from other countries on Remnant. Honestly, Roman has more similarities to RWBY at this point. I mean,
As for me, I'll do what I do best. Lie.
How did
We
he?
don't know. We were in a train crash, and ever since, well, suddenly Oz wasn't there anymore.
Steal.
Assume the ship was stolen.
Stolen? Okay, yeah, it was stolen.
Cheat.
I'm sorry. I don't have a question for you. I just needed a little more time.
And survive.
do I need to say more? Also, this may come off as a controversial opinion, but how do you mess up an intro song? Maybe it was just me, but compared to the rest of the RWBY intros, this one just felt tired. I understand that it's trying to pay homage to When It Falls and tone, but I just hate how it sounds. But this would mark the end of RWBY. Is what I would say if this was when I first made it. Because between the time of me creating this series summary and now, Volume 9 has come out and Ice Queendom has blown past like a fart in the wind. Does Volume 9 do anything to stand on its own? Does it do anything to improve RWBY as a whole? Well, let's dive right in and see, alright? We pick up right where we left off. Not with Team Noir or anyone on Remnant, but with RWBY as she lands into an unknown island. While this island is normal at first, small details point that it may be more than it seems. For one, there's a giant tree in the center of the island. There are 2 suns, and for whatever reason, the world has Looney Tunes physics, where exiting one side of the screen will spawn you back the way it came. While trying to make progress on the island, RWBY befriends a talking mouse she names Little. With Little's help, RWBY finds Blake and Weiss who are about to be burned at the stake by an army of rats. Joining them for the ride, Team Brawl comes across a monster attacking Yang. The monster flees, and Weiss recounts their failure. RWBY faints after learning that Penny died again. One blackout later, and the team realizes that they're inside the fairy tale, The Girl Who Fell Through the World. What is this story exactly? I don't fucking know, but it comes off as an Alice in Wonderland rip with the protagonist, Alex. Blake manages to come to this conclusion because of the talking mice, the vine trap to get Gamble Shroud, and a purple raccoon that Yang explains stole her arm. Little guides the team to the raccoon named Jinxie and begins a bidding war for his possessions. Jinxie's trades are very unconventional as he requires things that are not tangible. A great example being a jar of hope for Penny's sword. That being said, the team team manage to get Yang's arm back and Penny's sword. Blake wonders if following the fairy tale will help them escape. RWBY decides to go with this plan as she begins her emo phase. The team make their way to the Red King's castle and plan to present Penny's sword as a gift to their celebration. However, the team instead come across the unbearable Red Prince, who proceeds to disrespect Penny and murder the guards who presented him with the green sword. RWBY then proceeds to battle the Red Prince in a special variant of Ever After Chess. Basically, the two sides must rush at each other, and whoever has the most remaining soldiers after crossing to the other side wins. However, RWBY must play with her teammates along with her other damaged pieces. Team Brawley defeat the Red Prince. However, upon learning that his opponents are human, minus Blake, the Red Prince dubs the team cheaters and prepares to kill them. Before he can enact on his plan, a purple cat arrives to stop the Red Prince and aid in Team Brawley's escape. Hold on a moment. Is the cat voiced by Robbie Daymond? The same guy who played Goro Akechi in Persona 5? Who played Mephiles in Sonic X Shadow Generations? But more importantly, played Fish number 3 in The Dolphin Story of a Dreamer? How did they manage to get this guy? He's a legend! Anyway, while this is going on, Neo begins bullying the monsters that we saw in episode 1 or 2. Back with Team Brawley, the gang decide to follow Peter Parker over here in hopes to reach the tree to leave the Ever After. On their way, Team RWBY give a series summary to Gil Thunder about the past 8 volumes of their adventure. Mitsuki criticizes the story much like everyone else on the internet, but makes RWBY stop dead in her tracks when the cat brings up the improbability of stopping Salem. Because RWBY stopped for a single moment, the team lose Crow Lucifer as he wandered deeper into the forest. The team look for Saito, but come across a giant bug named the Herbalist. The Herbalist proceeds to get the team high, minus Little, and while tripping balls, Team RWBY encounter visions of themselves from Volume 1. Each member of the team have to confront an aspect about themselves. Yang about a simpler life where she could be whole. Blake where she doesn't need to wrap herself up in a conflict bigger than herself. Or Weiss, a life where she doesn't need to be pressured by a burden of a dying name. But Yub reaffirm that this isn't the life they want. Sure, they made mistakes in the past, but these experiences will help them grow on the path they chose, reaffirming that they are a huntress. But RWBY's shadow is different. RWBY's shadow taunts her about not being a hero of legend, and actively making others' lives worse. As RWBY succumbs to her shadow, Hubert von Vestra appears and saves Team Brawley from their drug trip. The Veneer sends the Herbalist into the ground after touching his heart, and the team leaves the Herbalist's house. As the team progressed through the Ever After, Buffalocost explains that he sent the Herbalist to perform a process known as Ascension, a process where an individual enters the Ever After and transforms into someone or something else entirely. They lose their memories and exit out completely different than how they were. Sway Sway explains that he did it before with the Red King, which is why he looks like the Red Prince now. To restore Blake, Yang, and Weiss to their former height, Tuxedo Mask leaves to procure materials. The three follow after Mamoru to ensure that he doesn't go off track, and RWBY has a brief encounter with a metallic woman in a forge. The woman tells RWBY that should she ever want to exchange her weapon, to visit her, but RWBY snaps back to reality as she exchanges her mother's rose emblem for the final ingredients for the girl's restoration formula. The three are about to eat, but RWBY is attacked by the monsters before, now revealed as Jabberwockers. Without Crescent Rose, RWBY does her best to protect her team as they grow up, but RWBY is saved by a long-haired knight riding a rabbit gazelle. I only just realized while writing this that it's actually a jackalope. Huh. Regardless, the knight buys time for Weiss, Blake, and Yang to revert to their normal size and get away on the back of his steed. Unfortunately, the team have to leave behind Kenshiro to deal with the Jabberwocker. At a safe distance away, the knight reveals himself to be Jean, and he reveals his tragic anime backstory of the Ever After. See, when he fell and landed on the island like everyone else, he came across a tree with a peculiar fruit in the shape of a clock. Jean picked up the fruit and was hurled back in time. How far is unknown, but since time flows roughly the same on Ever After and Remnant, I'd argue roughly 60 years back. Otherwise, that makes the age gap far worse than what people originally thought. But the real question is that shouldn't this have created two Jeans? I hate to break up the flow of this, but whatever, I already did this a lot before, what's stopping me now? See, time travel is very hard to get right. Your actions while traveling through time can mean nothing or severely damage future events. I bring this up because Jean very well could have stopped himself from traveling back in time, as well as spoil the plot of RWBY to characters we'll learn about much later. It's really tough, and I really doubt that there was that much thought put behind this decision outside of wanting a character to be a part of a fairy tale unintentionally. But let's get back to the story. Jean tells Team Broly about his final moments before falling, and RWBY begins falling into Volume 7 Ironwood's headspace. But before the group can sit on it, Daniel returns and Jean is not happy about it. Here, we learn Ascension is more or less implied to be a death sentence, since the process literally turns you into someone new. And Bot Dog Vendor reveals that Jean had traveled with Alex and a boy named Louis while in the Ever After. However, only one of them left when arriving at the exit. With Jean and Gris at odds with each other and Team Broly in the middle, everyone gets sent into a pocket dimension known as a Ponderstorm. Rules are simple. You either solve the problem or you wait it out until the storm passes. The scenario plays out more like a Danganronpa minigame or a mystery labyrinth from Ring Code, with everyone moving forward in hopes of breaking through the storm. However, the group is divided, with Jean, RWBY, Weiss, and Itachi over here traveling one maze, and Blake and Yang traveling another. Now, you may ask why Blake and Yang got separated from the group. Well, the answer is very simple. See, while the main plot was going on, Yang and Blake decided that the more important thing they should be focusing on is not getting out of here. It's actually on their relationship. I'll just quickly go through their end because it doesn't really add to much, and because it's more or less a footnote in this part of the story. Basically, Yang and Blake feel as though they're unsure about how their relationship is or if they're ready to step it up to the next level. Through a series of compliments, Blake delivering the more heartfelt ones and Yang struggling to come up with something unique about Blake, the two meet at the center and together they cement Bumblebee with a kiss. While this scene is nice and really plays into their dynamic, this feels like the worst time to address this. It comes out of nowhere, especially when we hit an important story note that needs all the time to develop. Again, not saying it's bad, just wrong time to focus on it. Anyway, back to the plot. Jean explains that he was part of the fairy tale of the girl who fell through the world. He played the Rusted Knight and aided Alex and Louis through the Ever After. However, Alex was much more cruel in person than in the story, basically leaving him for dead when she successfully poisoned him. Jean believes that Alex managed to escape while Louis was sacrificed to the tree by Daidara. However, Ebisu tells RWBY and Weiss that he had been betrayed by Alex after guiding her to the tree, and not wanting to be betrayed again, Bernard leaves the group to their own vices. This destroys the Ponderstorm and everyone leaves for Jean's village after watching a Blake and Yang makeout session. Jean tries to return Crescent Rose to RWBY, but RWBY has a panic attack and refuses to take it. As night falls, Jean tells the group that Alex probably traded Louis's life for an exit before heading to bed. The next day, Team Broly see just how far Jean has fallen mentally as he organized a whole schedule around saving the people around his village. These people, the paper people, basically live to serve those who come to their village, but they are under constant threat of dying whenever they do, well, anything? Through them, they reveal a new perspective about the tree to the heroes. The tree acts as a neutral party that aids in the development of the people in the Ever After. When one's purpose is fulfilled, they can return into it to receive a new purpose at the cost of their former lives. I probably should have explained that first, because we shift over to Jean, who hears the team call him crazy, and we get to see a glimpse of the man who spent roughly 60 years in isolation, full of nonsensical beings. But again, we can't focus on this, because the village is being raided by Neo's Jabberwockers. You can tell that they're hers because they disintegrate into pink when defeated. Team Bougie fight off the Jabberwockers, but RWBY finds herself unable to wield Crescent Rose to fight back. After fending them off, Jean calls out RWBY for her inaction, but quickly shifts his attention to the destroyed village. The village is destroyed not because of the Jabberwockers, but because of the flood that drowned the Paper Pals. Jean is very distraught about this, with not only this, but both Penny and Pyrrha's death now on his shoulders. However, the real important moment finally shines when Blake, Yang, and Weiss turn to RWBY. RWBY finally snaps, opening up about all the repressed feelings she's had over the course of 8 volumes. About her status as the leader, having to be some bright-eyed optimist to help everyone else, not having the time to address her own issues but having to help everyone else with theirs. But Jean claps back by telling her that everything that has gone wrong was because of her and her actions. The only reason they're in the Ever After is because of her. The only reason Atlas fell Well, it's because RWBY insisted that they save everyone and not waver. Her plans have hurt more people than she realizes, and she is nothing more than an entitled, selfish brat for acting otherwise. This feels like a mix between the Ren and Watts arguments from last season, but more refined, and I enjoyed it. However, RWBY certainly didn't, as she flees into the woods. Little, who has been here the entire time, tries to comfort RWBY, but RWBY tells her to go home as she ventures further away from her team. RWBY eventually finds herself in a mansion created by Neo. Inside, she finds a round table full of previous icons of RWBY's past, including, but not limited to, Roman, Penny, Ozpin, Leo, Ironwood, Clover, Pyrrha, but last but not least, Neo. Neo proceeds to mentally and physically abuse RWBY, using the ghosts of her past to beat and shun the shit out of her, hopefully causing her enough damage to willingly ascend. Neo's plan works, but Dr. Kurahashi comes in to try and steal the kill. Id reveals that as a creature born with the purpose of curiosity, they have a desire to learn more by escaping the ever after. Their plan is to steal RWBY's body and search for the real creators of Remnant. Little ends up saving RWBY from Mike and tries to encourage RWBY to keep fighting, but much like her name, her hopes are too little and the poor mouse dies as Neo stomps on the poor thing. This tips RWBY over the edge and she drinks the tea that Neo provides. Team Bougie only arrive after RWBY drinks it and falls into the ever after for ascension. With RWBY gone, Neo is shocked and finds herself purposeless, giving Orbulon the opening to possess her body through Vor. Neo Cricket flees for the trees while Team Bougie make their way to stop them and save RWBY. Jean learns the importance of letting go and allowing yourself to learn from your failures or just accept them, and the team find themselves at the tree in front of the wooden RWBY statue. Yang wants to bust her sister free, but Blake tells Yang that it's RWBY's choice if she chooses to be herself. But suddenly, Neo Noboru arrives disappointed with his current host. With no attachments to Remnant, Neo can no longer return there. So instead, Neo Chai decides to reclaim RWBY's body for his escape plan. Team Bougie defend RWBY's statue, and a fight soon ensues. Meanwhile, we finally cut back to RWBY, who finds herself face to face with the blacksmith woman from before. The blacksmith encourages RWBY to be the person she wants to be by choosing a weapon. RWBY looks around and comes across her mother's weapon. Upon touching it, she sees what's most likely a memory from Summer's perspective. It shows the moments before Summer left on her final mission, reading a bedtime story for Yang and RWBY, saying goodbye to Tai Yang before leaving with Raven. From this memory and words from the blacksmith, RWBY realizes that the little girl from Patch who forged her own scythe is good enough for her. The team struggle to fight off against Neo RS, but with RWBY returning in an epic anime entrance, Team RWBY reunite and defeat Neo Merlin, separating the two in the process. Neo kills Flex Turn using her Mirage Jabberwockers, marking an end to another role of the handsome Robbie Damon. Neo then bids farewell to Team RWBY, Jean, and her illusion of Torchwick before making her way inside the tree for her own ascension. Before the team leave, they come across one last creature of the ever after, a mouse warrior with an orange cloak. RWBY thanks the creature for support on their journey and dubs them somewhat. No, that's not me saying an attempt to their name. Their name is Somewhat. They leave Somewhat. Fuck, I already hate this name. Anyway, they leave Somewhat, Jean's Seed, Juniper, and together, the team make their way towards the exit. Team RWBY don't leave the Ever After just yet, as they find themselves back in the tree. They encounter the blacksmith again, who returns Jean to his 19 to 20-year-old self, and proceeds to expo dump some things. 1. Lewis returned to Remnant, while Megumi killed Alex after learning of her betrayal. And then second about the brothers from Legend. It more or less boils down to the brothers being born in the Ever After, and moving out to create their own world when they got too big. It doesn't really add too much to what we already know, but whatever, someone's gonna go off with it. Team RWBY leave the tree and re-enter Remnant at the dusty kingdom of Vacuo. Do Team RWBY stop Salem? Does Salem succeed in gathering all the relics? Does White fall in love with Roman Torchwick's ghost? Find out when RWBY Volume 10 drops in the year. Volume 9 is a weird mixed bag in terms of quality. For one, RWBY finally gets proper development. Her questioning her worth amongst the sea of failures she caused was kinda well done. I like how you can connect this back to Volume 1 with her leadership issues. But that being said, the problematic messaging that comes with this is pretty iffy. Remember, RWBY was able to come to the conclusion that she was enough after performing an act that has been nothing but consistent in its portrayal of death, giving the idea that game ending yourself will help you become stronger in some twisted sense of the term. And it's not just with RWBY either. The Paper Pals are trying to constantly play Sudoku, and after one successful attempt, they evolve to become stronger against the natural elements. It's really weird, and the fact that someone could come to this conclusion speaks to how poorly it comes across. I love the cat as an antagonist, and that's for more reasons than just having Akechi talk to Ruby Rose. I like how the cat moves and how its design makes it complement the feel of the Ever After, but I feel like I could have enjoyed it more if I had known about the story and the characters they were referring to. As someone who doesn't watch or read the supplemental material of RWBY, I feel completely lost when it comes to the fairy tale they're referencing. I know it's based in Alice in Wonderland, but that doesn't change that RWBY could have changed how the story was written. And that is the summary of the beloved show RWBY! I can't cover an ending I don't have, and Volume 10 has no signs of coming out in the near future. Watch and see if this line ages like wine or spoiled milk. This script has been brutal, and drawing everything has been much worse. And don't even get me started about how much I fucking stutter when I'm trying to record. God damn. Seriously, how the fuck was I supposed to come up with a script when I have bullet notes that are either too vague or have too much bias? Either way, I have serious mixed thoughts about RWBY as a whole. I love the world of Remnant, I love semblances and the character designs, and my god, the early action was just peak. But past Volume 3, heck, I will say past Volume 4 if you want to play softball. It's just not fun. The protagonists have some kind of hive mind mentality that makes them all feel like the same character. Adam, Ironwood, even Watts got wasted. My boys! How could they massacre my boys? They don't know what to do with Blake now that her journey is basically over. Yang feels like a completely different character as her rage and temper overpower the fun older sister vibe. Weiss? Actually, Weiss is pretty consistent, all things considered. But RWBY didn't get any semblance of character development until Volume 7, where she becomes a hypocrite for no reason. It just makes me so sad. But that's just me rambling. But if you want to stop the Dami Mommy who looks like overcooked salami, then let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, leave a like and subscribe as it helps idiots like me who suck at promoting videos. But until next time, stay safe out there.